Hello, everyone. Thanks for giving us your time today. I'm Ian Hamilton in New York, joined by David Heaney from London, broadcasting this episode of VR Download Today. This is week 3 of 2024, and I'm wearing a Quest Pro with face. Oops. Where's that coming from? 1 second. Here, David, tell us what's coming up today.
Sure, I'll just catch up here. So we have a monster episode today, really a lot of topics to talk about. So we're going to try and stay relatively on topic and get through them relatively swiftly because, as you probably know, last week was CES, the Consumer Electronics Show. And while not all the topics that we're talking about today were announced at CES proper, many of them coincided with CES. And it definitely is a time where even companies that aren't formally at CES tend to announce their hardware and their intentions for the new year. So we'll first talk about Meta's U-turn, where they have restored Quest's TV casting capability just 2 weeks after removing it. We'll then talk about the leaked videos that show how Quest 3's upcoming mixed reality Augments feature will work. LG confirming its plans to release an XR device as early as next year, and we'll talk about whether that might be the rumored Quest Pro 2. We'll quickly discuss why Wi-Fi 7, as while it will bring some improvements, won't significantly reduce wireless VR latency and why that is. We'll talk a little bit about VRChat and Rec Room. So for VRChat, we'll talk about the fact that it can now automatically generate a mobile optimized version of your avatar so that other people can see your PC avatar. We'll talk about Rec Room soon getting full body avatars and what that will mean for the platform. We'll talk about Panasonic's Shiftall subsidiary announcing a new version of MeganeX, the MeganeX Superlight, despite the fact that they have not yet shipped the regular MeganeX to the US. We'll talk a lot about Apple Vision Pro, obviously, the huge elephant in the room, just a few weeks now from launch. We'll talk about the Chinese knockoff of it that we tried at CES. We'll talk about the report that Apple will have fewer than 100,000 units ready for the launch. We'll talk about the ordering process, both online, where you need a iPhone or iPad Pro with a Face ID to scan your face and get the best possible facial interface fit. We'll talk about the report of how the in-store demos will work, how many people will probably be introduced to proper headsets for the first time when they sign up for a demo at their Apple Store. And we'll talk about how those demos might go, what Apple's focus could be, and the fact that reportedly they could last 25 minutes, which means this is not a quick in test a headset demo. This is a full sales pitch. We'll talk about the extra specs that may have been revealed for Vision Pro, which variant of the M2 chipset it's using and how much RAM it's using. We'll talk about Apple's announcement that there will be over 150 3D movies ready to watch at Vision Pro's launch, and some of its other announcements around entertainment platforms, and that real pitch that Apple is making of this is a sit down on your couch and watch a gigantic virtual screen. We'll talk about that use case. We'll then briefly discuss the major emulator news this week, where CitraVR was released that brings the Nintendo 3DS to Quest. You get, instead of having a little console in your hand, you have a giant screen, but you still have that 3D rendering, except instead of that auto stereoscopic display that's a little bit uncomfortable for a lot of people, it's true VR 3D, not VR, but true 3D that you would get through a head-mounted display, and how that can look really great. And finally, we'll talk a little bit about AR glasses. There's two pieces of news there. Firstly, Google all but confirming that it's no longer working on its own AR glasses, that it will work with hardware partners instead. And finally, TCL, the Chinese tech giant, launching a crowdfunding campaign for the first standalone AR glasses, which should also be the first product to use micro LED displays. So I'm almost out of breath saying all those topics. There's a huge number of things we're going to discuss today, and I think Ian is back to discuss them with me.
I switched headsets in the time it took you to switch to go through the topics. I went from a Quest Pro. So my Quest Pro disconnected. I'm on a fresh Wi-Fi connection. My Quest Pro being the only device I think that was connected to that base station, and it connected within a few seconds of us starting our show. I don't know what that was, but now I am in a Quest 3. I always like to try to bring my weird facial expressions for our audience out there, uh, as captured by the headset. It is a massive show, and I am going to try to stay on topic here, even though that's almost impossible for me. So let's get into that first bit of news here about the Quest TV casting capability being restored. What's the weirdest thing here is the timeline here, isn't it, David?
Yeah, this is very strange. So in December, some Quest owners started noticing this feature disappearing from their headsets. So they went to Cast, and the only option they saw was a PC browser or the smartphone app. And for a while, it was a big question of, is it a bug in the Quest software, or is this something Meta's intentionally doing? And then at the end of December, Meta's head of VR, Mark Rapkin, came out and said that this is an intentional thing they're doing. They're removing the feature because it was never officially supported by Google, and it had many reliability and stability issues. So their plan was to remove it at some point in the future, do an official supported version, or at least that was heavily, strongly hinted at, and then bring it back. But once this was removed, there was obviously an outcry from Quest owners because this is a really useful feature. If you are in the room with friends or family and you want them to be able to see what you're doing, if you're hosting a VR party, if you're doing a demo with someone, it's great to be able to see on the biggest screen in the room what they're seeing. And taking that away is just, it's very strange to take away a core feature from a product like this. And to be clear, the casting technology here is Google Cast. So that means it can cast to Chromecast sticks, Android TV boxes, TVs with Chromecast built in, Google TV sticks, and et cetera, et cetera. And I saw at CES that pretty much every single TV that I saw at least has Google Cast built in now.
I'm looking at our comments here. People tuning in across the snowy United States. Very cold here. I'm in New York, where it is snowing off and on throughout the day, and I'm seeing a lot of people here around the New York area in the Northeast. And yeah, it's very cold out there. I was able to get cozy up here in my VR headset. It's always nice when it's cold that you can warm up a little bit in the VR headset. The flip side of that is if you're in a warm climate, it becomes almost unbearable during summer months if you don't have air conditioning. Um, any comments you wanna respond to before we move on?
Yeah, just multiple people saying that this is something that really helped selling the headset. It's great for demos, vital, and yeah, just pretty much echoing that same sentiment of people that this is an essential feature and shouldn't be taken away. The the caveat here is that it was never stable. The most common bug I had with this was that it would just freeze on a single frame and you have to reboot the headset to get it to work again. It could be very, very frustrating. So the last thing I think we'll say about this is that I'm very much so looking forward to, if it does happen, official support from Google that should make this feature actually work really well, because it is just so essential. This is something you get by default on PC because the view is mirrored on the monitor. It's something you get by default on PlayStation VR 2. But when it comes to standalone headsets, this has to actually be implemented and has to work wirelessly. And it does seem a big technical challenge to get this to work for every possible TV setup.
Yeah, we are moving towards Apple Vision Pro launch. It is the last part of our show here, or it's a big part of our show here, I suppose. It's coming up here soon. But I'm curious how AirPlay is going to run in comparison and how smoothly it's going to run on that headset. But I'm seeing our comments here. Yeah, a lot of people are dealing with the cold and people, yeah, chiming off about the casting. It was a major feature to kind of lose suddenly like that. But it's quite a quick turnaround to add it back in. I
It's a
do
great point
want it
about
to work
AirPlay.
reliably, though.
Yeah, so from what we've seen, some people have actually seen it already show up on their iPhones. It being an AirPlay receiver for Vision Pro, so that's something that obviously Meta does with their app. It would seem to me very, very likely that this also supports Apple TV, though Apple TV is something that is, as far as the figures I've seen, has a much smaller install base. While you are starting to see some TVs built in with AirPlay these days, there are probably quite a lot more with Google Cast. So I wonder, if you're getting a $3,500 Vision Pro, you might as well get an Apple TV alongside it, I guess.
Yeah. You want to move on to the next one there so we can move our show moving quickly?
So James O'Loughlin is just saying, and we haven't verified this, but Apple Vision Pro press impressions are being published by The Verge and Engadget, and other outlets like that. Looks like there's some sort of a pre-event there, so we'll definitely take a look at those after the show. But yeah, let's talk about Augments on Quest 3. So this is obviously a feature that was announced at Connect by Mark Zuckerberg when announcing Quest 3, and they were just described as persistent, spatially anchored digital objects. And we saw examples like a portal to your favorite game or, a clock on the wall. But in the leaked video, and please go to uploadvr.com and you can see these videos in more detail, we see that these augments are not just the kind of barely interactive widgets that you might have imagined that are kind of just sitting in the corner of your room. These are fully interactive mini apps. So one of the examples you see here is a fully functional mini pinball game that can sit on your table. Another example is a calendar app that is obviously being linked into, we don't know the details here, but it presumably one of the popular calendar services. And then you can actually kind of tick it off on the wall. We also saw like a mixed reality plant pet like thing that you can water. So what's clear here is that these are full-fledged mini apps that will run in the Quest home interface. So without having to launch an app, these apps are all running alongside each other in your pass-through environment. And the detail from one of these videos here is that these are actually built in Meta's Spark Studio, which is it's the software for Windows and Mac that's used to build Instagram filters and Messenger filters. And so that's very interesting because that means that these are going to be a lot more lightweight than Unity or Unreal, rather than being these full-fledged package applications. These are essentially just some assets in JavaScript that are being handled more by Meta's system software than by the engine. And that's something that I've talked about for years and years, is saying that this is something Meta should be doing in general for VR and for AR, to actually build their own development pipeline and rendering stack and physics and tools, rather than being dependent on these heavy bloated engines like Unity or Unreal. This is fascinating to me because I suspect that this is the same way that apps will be made for the AR glasses. And I actually wonder how likely it is that there's going to be direct compatibility here, so that any Quest 3 augment is also going to be an app for AR glasses. And that's where the commonality between what will eventually be Meta's two very different platforms will be, because you'll have this XR headset running this kind of heavy Android with all of these Unity and Unreal apps, and you'll have this really, lightly powered AR glasses. And I think this is where this all links in and gives Meta more end-to-end control and gives you that advantage of these all run alongside each other, just like what we see on Vision Pro with its shared space, Apple's equivalent being Reality Composer Pro and Reality Kit.
People in the comments chiming off on the idea of MR pinball. Yes, MR pinball is a killer idea. I know there are a lot of hobbyists out there working on various avenues towards sort of all-in-one boxes, or just, I know that there's enthusiasts out there that love just a one-to-one pinball machine. There's plenty of people that are like building up a market of these arcade cabinets at home that have maybe one game or 5 games, or you hack the machine and then you've got hundreds of games. And pinball's similar, at least when you've got a completely virtual machine. And so there's, people in the comments here definitely want that, and I think we want that immediately. I know there's hobbyists out there working on some really cool ideas, but an official solution that runs in your environment or sits there over there in the corner. The thing that I think a lot of our commenters, we were like a broken record about, is the idea of physical controllers that could sit there relative to the stuff sitting in the real world. You see the controllers sitting in this hand as an example of augments here, but it would be great if augments could be attached to physical objects in your environment. Anything in the comments you want to respond to?
Yeah, just that's a very interesting idea, being to hook these augments in someday with physical objects. Maybe there's, as you say, a pinball table you want to interact with. Maybe there's a specific table in your house. It does look like these are going to be spatially anchored, so where you place them is where they stay. And I think the main thing that this is going to do is for a lot of these sort of mini experiences, really, really reduce friction. It's going to be interesting to see what are the limitations of this platform. It seems like there are some heavy performance requirements, as in strict performance requirements, and that this is only using JavaScript. I'm very, very curious to see where this goes, because it seems like it's going to be an entire secondary ecosystem. And as you say, this isn't like you put on the headset, you scroll through your app launcher, you find an app. This is you place it there, and the next time you put on your headset, it's there in your room, like a kind of sort of what's the word that some marketers have used, a real world metaverse where you have these contents that are uh, alongside the real objects.
I'm curious, on the other end of this, whether you can have these as sort of persistent things that are sort of updated for your game world. So if you wanted something persistent from your game world that, I don't know, would change in your environment and then it affects your game once you go into the game. So you could go into the game and whatever happens in your augment could carry over. I'd like that to be a mechanic.
Yeah, that would be very interesting to see whether there's crossover like that. It'd also really interesting to wonder, could some of these could there be ones that aren't spatially anchored that run alongside VR apps? So you're in a full-fledged immersive experience and you can have one of these mini experiences running alongside. That's obviously something that would be way off, probably require future hardware that's more performant. And what we've been talking about in this show, we still just want the browser to be able to stay open while you're still in an app for now. That's still something we don't actually have.
Arlen making the comment, augments should include all the classic unlicensed games like chess, checkers, and so on. Yes, definitely. We know someone who's a frequent viewer of our show, who would be working on that exact idea. It would be a great idea to have, if they ever followed through on it, at a major platform company. But yeah, I'd love to see something like that, and I want to see what Game Room looks like over on the Apple Vision Pro. Any comments you want to respond to?
Yeah, I think we can move on to the LG topic. As you say, it'll be interesting to see whether there is that kind of classic chess, checkers, and so on that Arlen is bringing up in the comments. And it'll also be interesting to see how Vision Pro's take on that works in Game Room. So shall I
Yeah,
just
talk
run?
about LG. Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I wanted to give the quick backstory here that is like a footnote in history, as David pointed out. 2007, going to GDC and seeing a demo from LG teamed with Steam with a very bright display. I remember the colors were very memorable on that display. That Steam never shipped, that LG never shipped a second Steam VR headset that never arrived. And then this company more or less disappeared from the VR scene with a few exceptions here or there. And then there's this.
Yeah, as you say, LG did have that very short and sharp history. In 2016, before that Steam VR prototype was shown off, they actually had a compact smartphone tethered headset that was essentially a 360-degree photo and video viewer, and it was meant to be paired with their 360-degree stick camera they had back then. It released to terrible reviews. They're almost comical, some of the reviews. If you look at LG's 2016 phone headset, some of the people, I think one of the funniest reviews I saw was in the pros list. It was good for if you giving a gift to someone you dislike, which is a really hilarious way to put that. But as you said, in 2017, they also showed off that Steam VR headset prototype that was set to be, an alternative to the HTC Vive, and they never shipped it. So that was the end of LG's history in VR. And so now we're 7 years later, and it looks like, a completely new era for LG could be on the horizon. We have heard that so LG confirmed to a South Korean outlet that they are planning to ship an XR device or XR devices next year, ideally. And they said that, if they don't make next year, they would hope to make the year after that. So they didn't give any details about what this was, but there are earlier rumors that suggest what this could be. There have been multiple reports from South Korean news outlets that have indicated that LG was in discussion with Meta. The first report was talking about LG supplying OLED microdisplays to Meta for their future headsets. And the second report was a lot more interesting. It was just late last year, and it suggested that Meta had actually teamed up with LG for future Quest Pro headsets so that LG would use its electronics expertise. LG builds high-end TVs and all sorts of appliances. It's really good at hardware. It knows what it's doing. It can produce produce high-end premium hardware, while Meta would obviously handle the software, the Meta Quest platform, the tracking system, the computer vision, all of what it's really, really good at. And that report indicated that the first headset out of this partnership, presumably called Quest Pro 2, would launch in 2025 for around $2,000. So that would be next year. That timeline matches up with what LG has said here, that it plans to release an XR device next year. But to be clear, there was no official confirmation of the Meta partnership. That remains just reports and rumors from South Korean media for now.
Very interesting tea leaves to read there, things to consider. I wonder about the historical comparisons to the Rift S, to think about Meta potentially partnering with somebody else like they did for the Rift S. However, I think the Rift S was dead on arrival. It was not a product line that Meta planned to see into the future in any way, shape, or form. And I would love to know the date of that final call from like sort of leadership to the second in commands over at Facebook at the time. But Rift S launched at the same price as the Quest back in that time period, both at the same $400 price, and only one really received any significant software updates. I don't think that's going to be the case here if LG ends up building a Quest Pro 2, as this might be the device that ships with codec avatars and real face-to-face phone calls via VR headset.
Yeah, you're right at first to say that this is not the first time Meta would be partnering with an external hardware company. The Rift S, as you say, was designed and manufactured by Lenovo. As far as I understand it, it was a very quickly spun up project that happened in the Rift of the sorry in the midst of the cancellation of the Rift 2, which was going to be this high end PC VR headset, and then in that shift to kind of lower cost devices, they ended up getting that Rift S out quickly. There was also, of course, Oculus Go. A lot of people don't remember Oculus Go, the standalone headset before Quest that didn't have positional tracking, was manufactured by Xiaomi. But in both of those cases, you have these companies, Xiaomi and Lenovo. They're typically specialize in low cost hardware that's cheap and effective. And with Oculus Go, they got it down to $200, and with Rift S, it was at $400, probably with some sort of margin there, given the cheap materials and such. But LG, as anyone who owns their televisions or some other devices will know, is very much so specialized in creating high-end premium hardware. So I think this is likely to be something that it delivers a very different result there and is supported for longer. But as you say, there was this other. There was a leaked roadmap from Meta early last year that The Verge accessed that showed that they had cancelled a 2024 Quest Pro 2, so that would be this year, in favor of a further out Quest Pro 2 that has those photorealistic codec avatars that have been shown off in research for years now and was famously demonstrated on the Lex Fridman podcast with Mark Zuckerberg and Lex Fridman having the first photorealistic avatar real-time VR call. So if this is that device, if this is the device that Meta hopes they can ship and use that as a headline feature, it could be fascinating to finally see all that research come in and see, the VR calls of today that have avatars that look like this, or a slightly different style but have the general same fidelity, all the way to those heavily machine learning driven photorealistic codec avatars. And as I'm sure you would point out, Apple is already shipping their own version of this with Personas in Vision Pro, not quite at photorealism, and seem to be using creative art techniques to kind of hide them within rectangles sometimes, and sometimes kind of put a creative blur on them to hide the imperfections. But it is definitely the same kind of concept. And Meta, given all the research Meta's put out, given Meta's focus on being the social company, they're probably going to want to get their equivalent codec avatars out as soon as possible now. And this could be that headset.
Yeah, we'll be watching this space very closely. Lots of things to keep an eye on there. I think we should probably move on to the next subject since we've just got so many things to get into. And I think we're going to have to build to the Apple Vision Pro people out there. It was interesting to see the after the show comment. We've got a lot of live commenters. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in and all your comments. But we also have the after the show comments that are left just via email sometimes, but mostly on the actual link itself on YouTube, and people debating sort of the value of Apple Vision Pro right now. There's plenty of people kind of trying to hold the line that it is a not important product. We are building to it, and we're going to keep talking about it no matter what happens, because it is going to be a significant product. What do you want to talk about here in the comments, David, before we move on?
Yeah, I think we can move on to talk about Wi-Fi 7 briefly. And as you say, for anyone who's just tuned in and didn't hear our lineup at the start, we have a huge section discussing Apple Vision Pro coming up in about 3 or 4 topics from now, where we'll be discussing a lot of the things we've learned in the past week, including pre-orders. So if you're here for that, stay tuned. So we'll just briefly cover this article I
And
published about Wi-Fi 7, and I was driven to publish this because I saw some spurious claims about what this could do for wireless VR. I'm not going to name any names, but there were claims that suggested that Wi-Fi 7, which was just officially launched at CES last week, is going to bring near zero latency for wireless VR, and think of how amazing that could be. The problem is it's not really the case, and it kind of fundamentally misunderstands the causes of latency in popular wireless VR systems. So obviously, I'm sure everyone's aware that if you're using a native PC VR headset with a DisplayPort cable, it's sending either raw frames that are not compressed at all, or lightly compressed frames that use algorithms like DSC, this DisplayPort compression, that don't use heavy compression. They only can compress by a factor of like 3 or so, and they are very computationally inexpensive, so it doesn't add any latency. The problem is that if you want to stuff a high resolution, high frame rate video stream down a Wi-Fi network, you have to use much heavier compression. And by heavier, I mean computationally. So it actually takes time for your GPU on the PC side to encode each frame, and then for the decoder in the mobile chipset on the headset to decode the frame. And I made a little quick chart to kind of illustrate that this is actually where the majority of latency exists in popular wireless VR. By popular, I'm referring to going over Wi-Fi. There are obviously, of course, high-end, expensive wireless VR systems that require you to buy a $300 adapter that you strap to your wall and have to have perfect line of sight to a massive receiver on your head. That's not what we're talking about today. Those systems use a lot lighter compression and sometimes no compression at all. We're talking about these heavily compressed wireless systems. That is what the vast majority of wireless VR people are using. It's probably what a huge percentage of Steam is using. It's what Steam Link uses. It's what Virtual Desktop uses. It's what Oculus Airlink uses. And as you can see, the biggest problem here is this decoding time of this heavily compressed frame. The good news is, as you can already see in this chart, that Qualcomm is making progress on this. And in the Snapdragon XR2 Gen 2 that shipped in Quest 3, the decoder is more powerful and more efficient, so it takes less time to decode each frame, and that brings down the latency. But what you can also see here is that the Wi-Fi transmission latency is essentially insignificant. Even if Wi-Fi 7 were to bring this down to zero, which it will not, it will reduce it, but not down to zero, it wouldn't really make a huge difference. So the only thing this monologue, this rant, is just to make clear that while Wi-Fi 7 may bring better signal stability in congested networks, it may slightly reduce this latency. It may make wireless play sessions last longer because it's more efficient. It's not going to be a game changer for latency. That has to come from video codecs and decoders in future chipsets.
I don't know if we have Gigo, the creator of Virtual Desktop, in our comments this week or not. We frequently have him as a viewer of the show. Thank you so much for tuning in the past. But I'm seeing a lot of people joking in the comments that Guy Godin with Virtual Desktop killed the Rift S. I loved that. That was a funny joke, but I would love to see Guy's response to that joke if he was actually watching it. And that's relevant for what we're getting into here because this latency, this stack of getting content to a headset is really, really key to everything we're going to discuss in the coming years, right? We're going to hopefully see this stack get smaller and smaller over time, and that will improve improve the overall experience of virtual reality for a lot of people. David, anything you want to talk about in the comments before we move on?
Daniel Leeper pointing out that Wi-Fi 7 is so fast that Ian can complete a round of walkabout mini golf before he's even thought about playing it.
Nice. Yeah, very, very good. I will tease things at the end of the show. If we've got Mighty Coconut in the comments, speak up, defend me. I'm yeah, we've got cool things coming.
Oh
I've
God,
seen the
you started it.
future. All right,
Uh,
let's talk about the
the
next thing, David.
Well, there's one more comment I want to bring up, which is Sirius Goo says that the best latency they've seen at CES was the Nofio. So that's a wireless adapter for Index. And I've heard some very mixed reviews for it. It seems that some people it works well for, but pretty much everyone it has a very, very, very loud fan. And so to be clear, this is a hardware adapter for the Index. I think it costs somewhere on the order of $300 plus or minus $100 or so. And yeah, it's one of those systems that uses its hardware level very efficient encoders that don't have anywhere near the encoding and decoding time. So this is a specialized system built for this. And yeah, we're still going to see wireless systems like this for hyper enthusiasts, but most people aren't going to spend that much money and deal with the kind of issues there, especially that usually very strict
Ky-
direct line of sight requirement. But yes, as you
Kyle,
say,
Kyle,
sorry, go
Kyle in
ahead.
the comments. Wi-Fi 7 is so fast, the pistol can whip you. It hurts. It hurts. It hurt to rate it. It hurt to say it. Hope you're proud of yourself, Kyle.
Okay, let's talk about Rec Room and VRChat because there's news from both platforms. We like to stay updated on those. Both Rec Room and VRChat remain often in the top three, if not top five. Sorry, top five, if not top three, currently most played apps on Quest. This is what a huge percentage of people are spending a massive percentage of their VR time playing. And so there are two big updates to these platforms we want to talk about. First is VRChat's impostors feature that shipped in December. And so the advantage here is if you're not aware, VRChat worlds and avatars have a PC versions and mobile versions. So just to talk about avatars, if you have your PC avatar, uh, mobile users, meaning people on Quest, on Pico, on Vive XR Elite, and on Android phones, won't be able to see it unless you've uploaded a mobile version. So that means you have to either manually make a lower quality version that fits with the performance requirements for the mobile versions, or you use a kind of third party tool to bring it down, or you pay someone to bring it down. And otherwise, they'll see a fallback avatar. You just choose from one of the kind of default fallback avatars that they'll see instead. And if you've tried VR chat on Quest or a platform like that, and you've walked around and noticed why is everyone a kind of floating robot? That's so strange. They aren't on PC. They look like this. So this feature called Imposters lets people with one click automatically generate a mobile optimized version of their avatar. You can see in this screenshot, this is what it would look like for the PC avatar here. And so on PC, that's what you will see. That's what everyone else on PC will see. But Quest, Pico, smartphone users will see this version. So obviously, as you can see, if you're not watching, you can just go to uploadvr.com and type VR chat avatars in the search. But if you are watching, you'll see this is a lot lower quality, but it still resembles you. It's not about, is this perfect? Ideally, in an ideal world, mobile headsets would have the computing power to show you this, but they don't. When you have, 20 or 30 avatars in the room and a complex world and scripts running, et cetera, et cetera. So at least having something that looks like you, that represents your identity, although not in the same quality, can be really valuable. And I also believe this is used on PC when there are performance issues in certain situations, such as when your avatar doesn't fall within a person's max performance settings. So, this has multiple uses, but mostly just so that the hordes of Quest and mobile users can see your avatar. And I think this is great because one of the big criticisms I have of VR chat, I appreciate many aspects of VR chat, but one of the things I really don't appreciate about it is this kind of second class citizen system where there are, if you're on Quest or a smartphone, there are huge numbers of worlds you can't access. And until now, there were huge numbers of avatars you couldn't even see. So I really like this feature because it bridges that gap between the first class PC players and the second class Quest citizens.
Yeah, I wonder whether this is a completely different problem or related to the problem of personas and codec avatars and the idea of standardization of expression across different mediums, right? Did VRChat just implement the first kind of compression system for avatars? And do we need like a compression system? Do we need a JPEG uh, system for avatars in order for us to have a path forward and don't have this thing happen where some systems can see avatars and some systems can't?
Well, this seems to be a VR chat exclusive problem. Banter we talked about a few weeks ago, maybe a month now ago. Its big pitch is that there is no division. It's standalone first, and the graphics will look better on PC, but their focus is making everything run great on standalone. We'll talk about Rec Room in a second. It also shows you the same avatars, obviously with visual quality differences. It's a general thing in gaming that you can show levels of detail and show kind of decimated, lower quality assets at a distance. It's just something where until now, VR chat didn't have this automatically. To be clear, this still requires the person to go onto the VR chat website and access their account and click generate. I hope that the next big update they make to the system is that this is on by default. I think they're obviously trying to give people control over their identity. If you are this person over here, maybe you don't want to look like this for some reason. So that's theoretically their choice. For me, I think I mean, when the alternative is that it's a fallback avatar that doesn't look anything like that, I don't understand why this isn't just on by default. But that's only how I would design it.
Well, the idea that they're called imposters is a real interesting one. The idea that maybe I've wondered about this idea that you could maybe have an agent version of yourself occupying your home, being a Sims version of you, running around on your own, and you get like a update of what it's been up to when you're gone. That's what I think of when I hear this term imposters, and I wonder if something like that will exist at any point.
I think it's a term from general computer graphics. The imposters is something that's been there for decades. But yeah, that's an interesting side topic we can talk about sometime. Is instead of driving an avatar with your direct body tracking, what if you give it the intention and then it kind of acts on your behalf? I've seen some ideas that I think you've seen as well of asynchronous meetings where your avatar attends your meeting for you and then responds in some ways as if it were you. But to me that seems very very out there in sci-fi for now.
It's pretty fascinating. Let's not get off topic, but the I'm seeing non-player character make it into general terminology more. Like there's more people using NPCs as a term, and I think of the old computer term or virtual reality term agents. The fact that it made a huge appearance in the Matrix years and years ago, and it's referring to the same basic idea of these things walking around on their own around you. Let's move on to Rec Room because it's a big deal for Rec Room to get some new features here with full body avatars, but with big asterisks on exactly what those full body avatars are. And David refused to take my headline on the Rec Room story. I thought it was much better because Rec Room is keeping the full body avatars only, at least at launch, for people who are level 50. So they're basically rewarding you with legs if you play Rec Room enough.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. As you say, Rec Room is getting full body avatars by March. They said by March, which seems to imply that it could happen in late February if they do hit that deadline. But at first, it will be for only level 50 players. And then over time, as they work out the bugs and fix any potential issues, they will roll it down. I assume it'll be for 40 and then 30 and then eventually everyone. Rec Room is obviously a platform that has a huge number of user created worlds with their visual scripting system, very similar to Meta's Horizon worlds in that sense. And Rec Room did it first, to be clear, I believe. And so they're going to have a lot of different testing scenarios and a lot of different cases that there might be edge cases for this. To be clear, these are not going to be forced. You will always continue to have the option, according to Rec Room, and they do say always, to choose between the original avatars with just a torso and hands and head and these new full body avatars. The other thing is that while they originally announced this last year that it would support Steam VR body tracking with strapped on Vive trackers and hardware like that, This will apparently not make it for launch, but they're still working on that eventually. There's also no word on whether this will support Quest 3's inside out upper body tracking or generative legs. For now, it sounds like this will just be good old fashioned traditional inverse kinematics, which is somewhat disappointing, but I understand that obviously, for a platform like this, there's obviously significant complexity in implementing new features like this.
If we're reading the tea leaves here, we've got good indications that what basic, like current VR headset designs have camera placements that at least allow them to do okay or minimal upper body tracking when paired with what multiple rounds of AI computer learning, right? Looking for patterns and movements in the images that are provided, right? So apparently, current designs do a good job of the upper body tracking, or at least a minimum job. Future designs might even do better. But what about the lower body, David? What is our path to actually getting real, proper lower body tracking for things like soccer or dancing?
So yeah, when you say current designs, to be clear, we mean Quest 3 and Vision Pro. They both have these cameras that are facing down. Vision Pros are better because they're facing directly down, whereas Quest 3, not Quest Pro, Quest 3s are on the side and facing uh, mostly down. But yeah, getting the legs is going to be challenging because there are certain body types for which those downwards facing cameras are going to capture the legs, but there are other body types where there are going to be parts of the torso that occlude them. So that could either be just because it's a large person in general, or because they have breasts, or other reasons that would just physically occlude those cameras. That means that potentially you can have a partial leg tracking system that just kind of extrapolates between what it can see. But other solutions are going to have to, realistically, I think, have sensors of some sort elsewhere. An obvious solution to that is to put them in the base of the controllers. So, with Quest Touch Pro controllers that you can buy separately for Quest 3 if you want, they have cameras that are facing kind of forwards and upwards. But if one of those cameras was on the handle, the base of the handle facing towards you, there would be quite a lot of time that those can see your legs. And we actually saw and talked about in this show about a year ago, maybe more than a year ago, a research project from, I think it was Carnegie Mellon, but don't quote me on that, where they built exactly that. They built a VR controller with a camera in the handle that fused in data to cameras on the headset to build that system. So that's one of the things that we might see emerge in, maybe that Quest Pro 2. Maybe the next version of the Touch Pro controllers will do exactly that. We'll have to see.
Yeah, it's interesting. The original Touch Pro controllers, of course, had little nubs that you could put into the base of the controller to turn it into a writing implement, and you could basically write on a desk in exactly like one app, uh, and that was it. They had that feature, right? That exact spot or somewhere in that area is where you could put the camera, and that would be a far more useful feature for full body tracking. Um, I want to encourage everyone to share the link out to this show as we move to the Apple Vision Pro section here very soon. Lots of people are going to be curious what's going on with Vision Pro. We're apparently some folks got access, early access to the headset. We will get into that soon and have that on our website. We're also, David and I are deep in planning here on making sure we've got our coverage locked down and planned for the Apple Vision Pro launch. We'll be ready to share all that with you soon. But I want to encourage everyone to come in here and ask your questions, your basic questions, your moderate questions, whatever you've got about all of VR, AR. We've got some very helpful commenters out there that can get you answers. And if it's useful to a lot of people, we'll try to address it in the show. You ready to talk about Shiftall or anything in the comments you want to respond to first?
A few comments bringing up the obvious points of, strapped on trackers. If you do have great upper body tracking from the headset, you can just have, two leg trackers, just two ankle straps that attach on, and that could be a relatively low cost solution. There's still going to be the argument from the platform holders like Meta that friction of having to strap things onto your body is not something that the vast majority of people will bother to do. There's going to be many people who put their headset on and grab their controllers and they just don't do that. And developers can't build around a system that doesn't have that reliably there. It's like you can't build a full app around something like that, or even a primary feature if all of your users aren't going to have it. It's like, especially that's the case if it's an accessory. If it's not in the box, developers are not going to build for that in any serious way. But just before we move on this off this topic, I just want to be crystal clear that Rec Room's full bodies at launch are not tracked in any way. They are just inverse kinematics estimating from your head and hand positions at launch.
I think I'm seeing a Metal Gear Solid reference in the comments there. I appreciate that reference. I think it's time to move on to this next one. And yes, also hit the like button over there. Make sure you hit that because it really matters to us. I noticed the Metal Gear Solid reference. Well, let's stay on topic. Let's talk about this headset. Kyle, did you ever find this headset? We got Kyle in the comment. Let us know if you actually did find this company's headset because this is their next one. And David, I can't stand the photo here. I can't. All right, David, explain what's going on here.
Yeah, it's pretty obviously not a real photo. And interestingly, from the shots I did see of this at CES of people trying it, it doesn't even look like this, which is really strange. So if you've been following the Shiftall and MeganeX story, yeah, as Kyle points out in our comments, it doesn't actually look like this, the prototype. We couldn't find any official press image from Shiftall that showed what it really looked like. This is the only image they released at all. This is a strange company. It's a subsidiary of Panasonic, so you think it has this kind of legitimacy, but they announced the original MeganeX years ago, and they actually showed it off. And I think CES 2022, so that's like 2 years ago now. They then again showed it off at 2023 and said it would ship sometime in 2023. That didn't happen, or at least it only happened in tiny, tiny numbers in Japan. And now it's CES 2024, and they're announcing a new version, ultralight, or sorry, superlight. So us talk about what this really is. It's essentially a big screen beyond competitor. It uses very similar OLED microdisplays of the exact same resolution to achieve an ultra compact form factor PC VR headset that is tethered to your PC. This is not a standalone headset. So this original MeganeX that hasn't even shipped in the US yet had some very strange properties. Firstly, it has built-in inside-out tracking and a Qualcomm XR1 chipset to handle that tracking. And so the problem was, of course, that many of the people looking for this and are interested in spending the $1,700 that this is advertised for aren't the people who want inside out tracking, especially not without controllers, because if they want to add controllers to this, they're going to have to add Steam VR base station tracking anyway to add something like the Valve Index controllers. So that seems to be what Shiftall have addressed in this new Superlight version. They cut out the inside out tracking. They say, right, forget about that. It's just going to be Steam VR base station tracking in the real version, not this weird concept that it doesn't really look like. There are visible photodiodes. And the other thing they've done, and the name for the product, is that they have significantly reduced the weight from somewhere around 400 grams to somewhere around 200 grams. And they've done that by shifting to plastic lenses with no glass element anymore. And that weight reduction really tells you a lot about VR headset weight that I don't think a lot of our viewers are aware. A lot of people are under the impression that something like a Quest 3, the majority of the weight is from the battery. That's not true. The battery is about 20%. One of the big reasons for the weight of a headset like Quest 3 and others, and Apple Vision Pro, that people don't realize, it's the lenses themselves. Pancake lenses allow for a shorter optical path, but they're actually thicker and heavier when you total up their optical elements together than a lot of the previous Fresnel lenses. And so you get this strange scenario where you can reduce a lot of the weight through the thickness, but then the actual lens itself is pushing the weight straight back up. And that's how you get to a situation like Quest 3 where there's other reasons for the weight, including the computing hardware and the large heat sink and fan that has to cool it to run at peak performance. But one of the huge reasons is just the sheer weight. So it's very interesting to see them move to all plastic lenses to get down to just 200 grams. So obviously this is in a non-standalone PC headset that doesn't have to have any computing hardware in it.
So, can you throw up the other image? To be clear, this is the image that they just announced, the future, whatever they're going to do. And then I'm seeing in the comments Kyle say that Alex and Kyle both tried this thing. this thing looks very similar to the Panasonic demo I tried a long time ago, with similar lenses, and it was cool. The thing I want to comment on, and I'm seeing in our comments people talk about Neil Stevenson and sort of future predicting the way people are going to think about their avatars. We're still at kind of like what's what is the minimum package to ship to millions of people? But we're still imagining a future, David, where people could have weird little things like this external to their headset in order to get better facial tracking. But I love how ridiculous this. I have no idea what the little are those antennas? What the hell are those, David? I've been looking at this thing for a long time.
I don't recall exactly what those are. I can't recall.
All right. Well, it's funny to imagine having headsets in the future that are so varied that you can have things like that for the specific purpose of like people that want the best in body tracking or the best in wireless connectivity or just right now we're still at the very basic steps of just what's going to ship millions of headsets. And I don't know. This one I don't know if this one's it, David.
Yeah, I wonder if they're going to. Obviously, that one we are showing there was the last year's, well, 2 years ago version. I wonder if they're going to just say to a lot of the people who were interested in the first one or even pre-ordered. I wonder if they're just going to say, "Why don't you just take this one instead?" It seems like it solves a lot of the problems. We haven't seen a price for this, and I still don't really get what the point of this is now that Big Screen Beyond is here. Big Screen MeganeX was shown long before Big Screen was announced, but Big Screen has come along and actually delivered on its promise. And unless they have a compelling reason to buy this over Big Screen, I don't see why people would, because why would you? If you can get the known quantity, the Big Screen Beyond, that gives you that custom fit, why would you get this from the company that has just continuously failed to deliver and announces a new headset before they've even fully shipped the first one?
Let's see. I think we're almost to the Apple Vision Pro section. Honestly, I'm not really interested in talking about this particular headset too much longer because I don't think it's gonna move the market or matter to many people. Um, yeah, I want to talk about the headset that is going to interest people, that they're going to talk about, that's going to affect their day, um, in various ways. Because it's even if you don't buy this thing, even if you want to ignore it, you're going to hear people talk about it and it's going to come up. So let's get into Apple Vision Pro with pre-orders coming up later this week. Uh
Well, yeah,
Kyle? Yeah, go ahead, David.
funnily enough, our first topic is not quite the headset that we're talking about here. Our first Apple Vision Pro topic is the headset that looks a lot like it, but isn't. And we'll not talk about this for long because it is what it is. But we tried the Apple Vision Pro knockoff at CES. This is not Apple Vision Pro. This is the Amdor AX162. And so, yeah, this is a
What was that name again, David? I want to make sure all our readers really know what paperweight to buy.
it's the Amdor headset. So this is from a Chinese company called UploadVR. And yeah, it's a headset. So let's see how much this looks like Vision Pro to start. So here is a to-scale 3D render of Vision Pro, I believe, from Apple's official CAD model that shows you Vision Pro at a certain angle. And you'll understand why I'm using a CAD model to get this exact angle in just a few seconds. Here is the Amdor headset. It is clearly designed to look as much like Vision Pro as possible, but when you actually try it, like Kyle, our operations manager, in our comments did at CS, you'll find it's nothing like Vision Pro. Surprise, surprise. Firstly,
Yeah.
the design is cleverly made to hide that this is a much thicker headset. This is using Fresnel lenses, and what they've cleverly done is they coated the front box, the visor, with the same material as the facial interface to make it look like it's a really thin headset. This part here, the metallic looking part at the front, is I believe it's just a plastic with fake metal coating applied to it, but it's actually, the protrusion here is entirely aesthetic. This does not actually house any components or anything like that. This is designed to simply look like the Vision Pro. The thickness of the headset is all the way to here, as you can see, and it's using kind of Fresnel lenses and the same resolution single panel display as a Quest 2. But it does promise full color pass through, and that's what Kyle was able to try on it. Except,
Full color pass through. Come on, come on. You got it. Come on. You can't. All right, whatever. Go ahead.
well, I was just about to explain exactly what that means. So it has full color pass through, except while Ian, who tried the Apple Vision Pro, described its pass through as rivaling transparent optics, so good, so clear, so high resolution, so low latency, so stable that it rivaled transparent optics. What Kyle found on the MDOR VR was very different. It was a low resolution, low frame rate, laggy experience that wasn't even at the correct scale, as Kyle is reminding us in our comments here. It was zoomed in, so the scale was so wrong. It's not even like this is off. It's actually zoomed in that you're not even getting the correct field of view, not even a wide enough sensor to deliver what you're looking for in pass through. It's also powered by an incredibly anemic processor, the Qualcomm XR1. That is not me misspeaking. That is the XR1, which is a fraction of the power of even the original XR2 in the Quest 2. It's actually got a less powerful GPU than 2018's Oculus Go. So it's anemically powered. And as you might imagine, its interface is designed to copy Vision OS as much as possible. So yeah, it's a Vision Pro knockoff. It doesn't have any kind of magic here. It's just using the most basic possible pass through to say we have color pass through of the lowest quality you can imagine. The function of it does seem like it's useful in its own right. You can play videos in a web browser. You can attach an SD card to watch your own videos. But whether it has a functionality that is useful does not mean it's a good product. This is selling currently already on AliExpress for $500. I think the only good thing I've heard about the hardware from Kyle and others is that it's quite comfortable to wear. So it's comfortable, but it's fascinating
When
to
it
see that we already have, before Vision Pro's even launched, a complete cheap Chinese knockoff.
So this is the headset. So I've been to CS over the years, right? And I remember going with the Alchemy guys years ago, and they were looking at all these booths, and there were people doing like they were walking around in VR, or at least they acted like they were. And you could ask these booths what's happening, and they're specifically like that person could be walking around a blank room for an hour, or just looking out from underneath their headset. That's how these booths can run sometimes at CS. It's like that's how bogus it is. This is a 3 DOF headset, right? This is a miserable. This can be when you say it's comfortable to wear, that's hysterical to me because I'm only gonna ever wear this as a joke when it's not a paperweight on my table.
Yeah, I think that's a huge point. By the way, I forgot to mention this does not have positional tracking. So you walk around, and obviously your zoomed in pass through view will be positional because it's a camera on the front of the headset. But the UI interface, the elements will be kind of fixed in front of you. Like if you're walking around like this, they'll be fixed. There's 3 DOF tracking, so you can rotate your head. But if you actually move forward, they'll stay there. If you move up, they'll be locked with you. It's like a weird knockoff of the Oculus
Yeah.
Go that's in the casing of an Apple Vision Pro with color pass-through. Very
Now,
strange product.
what's interesting is you called it a scam, or people in our comments are calling it a scam, and the fact that it's on AliExpress already suggests that people could buy in bulk it from there and then try to resell it as a scam. I've seen products like this back at the launch of the uh, iPad. I remember I went and got the iPad for myself. I was excited about using this new kind of tablet. And then there were these knockoff devices that had 3 USB slots and some version of Windows and had a completely different touch interface and were a battery that lasted about 30 minutes before it overheated and shut down. And like you would see these people go to China, bring over a whole pile of these things and then try to sell them in various weird ways. Like this is a pretty common thing, and the reason we're reporting on this now is it's already here before the Vision Pro has even been available for pre-orders, because of course it is, right? Like this is like why water is wet type story on one level. But on another level, it's just wow, this is actually remarkable because the thing hasn't even shipped yet.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, it's an example of just showing you the impact of an Apple product shipping, Apple entering a new industry is that alongside the real thing, you're going to get the cheap Chinese clones. And I think Vision Pro having its own, it's a good sign in a way. It's showing that it has that level of kind of hype and reputation amongst the suppliers in China and amongst these Chinese startups that they already want to copy it, just like, as you say, pretty much every other Apple major new product in its history.
I do like the comments suggesting that this is the headset that your mom buys you when she says that you have Apple Vision Pro at home. Let's talk about the next thing.
Yeah, so obviously the Vision Pro's pre-orders are going up on Friday. It is really close now. It almost doesn't feel real, but from Friday at 5 a.m. Pacific time, you're going to be able to put down your 3,500 or above dollars, depending on whether there's separate models. We don't know yet, and depending on what accessories you might add to really actually pay for this thing after all of this speculation and hype and the years where I remember on being on this show for so many years where we were telling people, here's what Mark Gurman from Bloomberg says. Here's what the information says. Here's what Min-Chi Kuo is saying. There's going to be this Apple headset. And we sat here on this show and we described a lot of what Vision Pro was. And I remember a huge percentage of our comments were BS. Not going to happen. This isn't real. Why are you talking about rumors? And now we got to the era where Apple officially revealed it, and it turned out it was all real. This is a real thing. It's really happening. And it felt like it was still so far off. It was, early 2024, sometime next year. And, the arrow of time stops for no person. And now we're here and it's early 2024, and this is really happening. And so I guess the first mini topic we'll talk about here is the availability, because there is a report from Ming-Chi Kuo, that same supply chain analyst, that revealed a lot of these details, including things like the M2 chipset and the OLED microdisplays years in advance. And they say that Apple will have fewer than 100,000 of these things produced by launch. Somewhere between 60 and 80,000 was the exact range. And so that's not what they'll have all year, to be clear. It's not saying that that's all they'll have all year, but for launch day, that is a remarkably small number of units compared to pretty much every other major Apple launch in the past few decades.
You start doing the math on uh, profit per device or the amount of revenue that might be represented by an entirely new product category, it might be substantial, even with a small number of units, at least as a starting point. We talked about this a lot last week that whatever Apple, there were people in our comments, we'll probably see it again today, suggesting that Apple has a sunk cost situation here. They feel somehow obligated to ship a product now after having invested billions in its development. Um, is the assumption out there, and that can be partially accurate, but also what is happening here is building the supply lines for the future, and that's really important for Apple to not wait too long that they actually can't secure the right supply for the key features that they want to have in their future devices.
Yeah, I'm not sure I buy the idea that that was the reason for this launch here. Apple is very secretive about its research and development for this being a main reason. They don't want to be beholden to say, we've talked about this so much, now we have to ship it. That may be, as we'll talk about later, Meta's impetus with their AR glasses, where they have talked about it so much, they have bet the company on it. But when it comes to research and development, Apple pretty much does it in private. They have this tens of billions of dollars they spend a year, but the shareholders and other investors trust Apple to do with that what they will. And there's never really any scrutiny. I've never seen in any of Apple earnings call them to ask detailed specifics about research and development. There's kind of a trust here that Apple is putting out these products and, becoming one of the most valuable companies in the world. And they must know what they're doing is the general sentiment I've seen. Just a quick note on rumors, just before we get into more discussion. James O'Loughlin is saying that there were rumors all over the place, including like a Valve partnership with Apple and 16K displays. And one thing I'd like to say, I think we do really well at Upload VR, not to blow our own horn here, but I think we're really good at not bringing you the rumors that aren't reliable and bringing you rumors that are mostly reliable. And we're not perfect at this. We do not have 100% score at this. But I think if you look at the Upload VR articles in the year before Vision Pro, you'll find that pretty much everything we reported was either very close to accurate or right on the money, because we very, very carefully look at who are the reliable sources and who aren't. And you'll notice we never talked about an Apple or Valve partnership or anything like that, for example.
Unless David gives me space to daydream.
Yeah,
We
yeah, I
ready to
wouldn't
talk about the
speculate on
next?
this show.
Yeah, we do a little bit of speculation, but yeah, David is absolutely right. Our track record is very, very good. And when David came online many years ago, now it's ridiculous that it's been years since we've been working together. We spent a good amount of time in those first few months discussing which reporters we trust, which outlets we trust, which processes seem reliable. And yeah, you can see it in our headlines and our reporting here on this show. We should be able to provide you better information than you get in a lot of other places because of that. So thank you all for staying with us on that journey.
So yeah, I do agree with you that in many ways, Vision Pro is just about getting the basics out. This is not, as we've said before on this show, and we'll say it again many, many times, this is not Apple's be all end all product. This is not the iPhone moment for spatial computing. This is the beginning. This is a headset that they cannot produce in significant quantities. The reliable supply chain reports suggest that they can only produce about 500,000 of these things in the first year. That means that even if every single one that they can make is sold, this will not reach the scale of the first iPhone. I think this is much more akin to some of their early personal computers. This is perhaps the Macintosh moment, and we're still quite a long way away from anything like an iPhone moment. Probably an iPhone moment won't be delivered in this form factor. It will essentially probably be something like glasses. But not only from the components perspective, where this is using radically different components than has been in pretty much any other Apple product. These are multi-layer pancake lenses, OLED micro displays, this entire new supply chain forming out of essentially nothing. OLED micro displays were used in some camera viewfinders and they were low resolution. They were used in some military head mounted displays in very niche low quantities. The consumer supply chain for really dense near 4K OLED micro displays is being built out of thin air through billions of dollars in investment through companies like Apple and Sony and some of the future potential suppliers like BOE and LG and Samsung. And that's one aspect of it. You've got this hardware aspect of it. This is Apple's, this is their minimum viable product. This is what they're saying. This is the quality bar at which we, Apple, will ship an XR headset or a spatial computer, as they call it. Then there's the other aspect that this is a new computing paradigm that's going to require very different software. This is not like this is not like the iPad where it's just scaling up the iPhone software, or it's not like, a new version of Mac OS. This Vision OS, while at first it's going to be a lot of just traditional iPad apps floating in front of you, over time, Apple is obviously going to want to deliver a richer experience that takes advantage of the spatial potential of this medium, the ability to integrate parts of your environment and use three-dimensional interfaces and all of these extra interaction paradigms that are opened up by hand tracking and eye tracking. And so the apps that are launching on this, most developers have been playing with the simulator, the Vision OS simulator. They haven't even put on the headset yet, or maybe some of them have at some of Apple's developer sessions for 10 minutes. When this first comes out, there's going to be a scramble for developers to buy this thing and start taking advantage of it. And it probably will not be for years until they've even released the kind of content that might be some of the most appealing use cases over time. It makes sense that Apple is starting with some of these traditional use cases like watching movies and TV shows, sometimes in 3D. Apple announced that there will be 150 3D movies available at launch, sometimes traditionally on a giant virtual screen. But while may be a huge percentage of the use case, we really will need to give developers time to build up. So you got this sort of parallel thing where the hardware has to be built up from a supply chain perspective. You get an expensive first model out as you build up the supply of OLED micro displays for future cheaper models. as simultaneously you got these developers coming in and actually building for it. And those hardware and software elements will take years to build up to be a huge part of Apple's business, like an iPad or an Apple Watch.
Yeah, I want you to move on through this list because I've got comments that I want to make at the end. Because yeah, I want to move on to the next bit of news here. Talking about the actual pre-order process here that's coming up.
Sure. So there's two pieces of news here. One discusses how you order it online. So if you're not aware already, the Vision Pro is exclusively available from Apple Store, either online or in person at their physical stores in the US. So when you order online, Apple revealed in the past week, you're going to need an iPhone that has the Face ID sensors on top, the notch or the dynamic island pill hole thing, or you're going to need an iPad Pro that has the Face ID sensors because you're going to need to scan your face to pre-order this online. And what that's going to do is measure your head and face to figure out what is the best size of strap and light seal, which is Apple's name for the facial interface, the face pad that actually attaches to your face. This is very interesting because it's a kind of midpoint between what Meta does, where they ship you out a headset that has a one size fits all, they hope, facial interface, and what Big Screen Beyond does, where they actually do the same scanning process with a Face ID iPhone. And what they do is they actually mold the facial interface to your face specifically. So you kind of have this midpoint at Apple where Mark Gurman from Bloomberg has reported that there's something somewhere on the order of like between 15 and 25 different sizes of all of these combinations. And so that's obviously going to make it a lot easier for people to find a comfortable fit. Because one of the things that's being reported about Vision Pro by Gurman and by some other testers is that it's actually quite uncomfortable in long sessions, or at least it can be for some people because of its front heaviness, despite the fact that Apple is offloading the battery in a tethered external battery. There's still so much hardware in here, and it's fitted with this aluminium casing and a curved 3D formed glass front plate that it still is going to feel heavy. And you'll know from our last show, we talked about the fact that Apple is going to release a secondary strap in the box. It's included with the Vision Pro, so that if the default strap isn't comfortable for you, you have this other secondary strap that you can choose. So comfort is obviously going to be a huge issue here. And part of that process of getting you the most comfortable fit is going to be that face scan. And so the other aspect that we learned this week from Bloomberg's Mark Gurman, again, very reliable in the past and has reported a lot of Vision Pro, is that quite a similar process will happen if you buy in store, if you want to go in person. You'll be able to, even if you don't want to buy, sign up for a demo if you're in the US and you have an Apple store near you. And these demos are reportedly going to last 25 minutes, where they will start by scanning your face with their own device, presumably a store iPhone. Then another employee will go into the back and build up a Vision Pro with the correct face pad for you. If you have glasses, they will actually scan your glasses to find the right optical insert to get your prescription, and they will bring that headset to you. They will walk you through the process of how to use it, how to adjust it, how to use the dial on the side to toggle between fully immersive, what we would call virtual reality, and the real room pass-through that we would call augmented reality. And then they will have people walk through the traditional use cases with this. So viewing spatial photos and spatial videos, viewing giant panoramas. They'll have a dinosaur experience that seems very similar to the Oculus Rift's Dream Deck dinosaur, and some other use cases, like they'll have you bring up multiple Safari windows and iPad apps and position them around you like you have this infinite virtual workspace of your choice. So Apple is clearly putting a lot of effort into these demos. Any of you in our comments who are VR enthusiasts who have owned headsets for years will know how important a demo is. I'm sure a lot of you have demoed your headset to your friends, to your family, to coworkers, to strangers, and you'll know that a bad demo is enough to make someone go off this forever. If you have a bad demo for headsets, you're not going to want to put one back on. A lot of people will just say, oh, I tried it, it wasn't great. But if you have a great demo, that can make someone really, really want to buy their own. And as I said last week, a lot of people are going to come out of this demo and say, you know what, I am not going to spend $3,500 on this. But then some years down the line, Apple is going to come out with a $2,000 or a $1,500 or maybe eventually a $1,000 Apple Vision or Apple Vision Air. and they'll think back to their demo at the Apple Store and they'll think, oh, look at all these features, look at all these apps. I remember my demo. I'm going to buy this thing. And that's Apple's strategy here, I think.
Well, yeah, I'm not excited for Fruit Ninja with hand tracking. We'll see if Fruit Ninja is really this and how that compares to Beat Saber, of course. If that's really how it turns out. But the thing we've talked about it on the show is this idea of people coming in and getting a great demo, right? If this product does nothing but that, if it just gives good demos to people, and Apple has to move on from it soon because that's just the way the chip architecture is built. That's one of the things I've wondered about, David, is do they have to get this out within a certain span of time before they go and ship something based on the M3?
It's an interesting question as to how quickly they will follow this up. There were people that were disappointed. You have the MacBook Pros now shipping already with the M3 chip, but I would point out that the iPad Pro is still shipping with the M2. The MacBook Air is still shipping with the M2. The M3 supply is probably quite limited now, and I'm sure if they had have had time to re-engineer this whole thing, they probably could have put it in. But a chip swap is just such a difficult thing. This is going to be designed around the exact thermals and the exact energy usage, and there's going to be a lot of testing. And we know that from the reports that we've talked about that this thing has been in development for years and years. And as you say, they just want to get this thing out. But I guess we'll briefly talk about that technical news from today that comes from Bloomberg's Mark Gurman when it comes to the chip and Mac rumors when it comes to the RAM. So Gurman is reporting that it is using the 10 core GPU version of the M2 chipset. If you're an Apple person, you'll know that there is an 8 core GPU version of the M2 and a 10 core version, and they're both called the M2. If you configure a MacBook Air on Apple's website right now, you'll see you can pay $100 more for those extra 2 GPU cores. And Gurman is saying that Vision Pro will have the 10 core version. So that ups our performance expectations for Vision Pro. Uh, for different benchmarks will tell you different things, but overall, this should be at least 50% more powerful from a graphics perspective than the XR2 plus Gen 2 that Qualcomm's just announced. And I say at least it could be, up to like 70 or 80% in certain use cases. And when you combine that with the fact that we've already talked about how the CPU is a lot more powerful, Apple has their custom cores that are, completely destroy the semi-custom cores in Qualcomm's XR chips. This is going to be a beast. And this comes alongside the reporting from Mac Rumors, who found files within Apple's Xcode IDE software that suggest that it's going to have 16 gigabytes of RAM. So that's double the RAM of Quest 3, somewhere between 50 and 100% more GPU power, and then well over double the CPU power. This thing is going to be a beast. This is going to deliver performance that has never been seen in a standalone headset that is closer to what you would expect from PC VR or PlayStation VR 2. But to be clear, not at that level. Still not at that level. There's still this massive gulf between standalone and PC, but this is going to get closer than anything ever has before.
Yeah, people in our comments are really responding to this war that is building between Meta and Apple. This battle for our perception that is waging out right in front of us. The thing I guess I wanted to bring up here, I think the time now is let me paint this picture, this hypothetical picture here that we've got a pretty good idea of what we think Meta is going to do based on all the reporting out there. All likelihood, Meta is going to do a Quest 3 Lite of some kind that hits a lower price than the current Quest 3 and probably has all the same features otherwise, except for a few small drawbacks. We've gone over that show in multiple shows. Then next year they do a Quest Pro 2 that is probably a closer target to what people actually want. They missed the mark with Quest Pro 1 and then they're lining up to do a Quest Pro 2. Now obviously things can change, but that's the next 2 years to us of what Meta is probably planning. Now the question is, what is Apple planning? And how quickly can they get here? Well, on Friday, they're gonna open pre-orders for this first device at $3,500, and I wonder how many of the people who place that order are going to just take it straight off their credit card limit. They're gonna put it on the Apple Card, and they're gonna break it up into monthly payments, and they're not gonna pay any interest because they're gonna pay it to Apple, and this is gonna be a test of the size of Apple's credit program. You put a popular new computer that's multiple thousands of dollars, and you've already got an Apple credit card system. I'm curious. They're gonna do amongst their test, right, of their supply lines, their developer ecosystem. They're also going to test exactly how many of their buyers go and put this on a credit card. And I'm seeing in our comments all these people like, how am I going to convince my wife I'm going to do this? We joked last week. There's got to be fights going on in certain discords of just how exactly are you going to afford this? And then this question, this comment here going up a few bits earlier, if this thing gets refreshed in 1.5 years, I'm gonna be very disappointed. That was one commenter, right? The price of this thing is equivalent in some places to like a car. It's approaching the size of a down payment for a house in some respects, especially if you start thinking about accessories that you might attach to this thing. And the idea that this thing might be old tech in anything less than 3 years is very hard for a lot of people to imagine. Like, if you're gonna go get a MacBook, you want 5 plus years of service out of that laptop. Are you gonna get 5 plus years of service out of this headset? I don't I don't know. I don't think so, and I don't know.
So I'm going to argue against that. I do think so, and here's why. I think that it's very likely that there will be a Vision Pro 2 on the timeline of say 2026. So 2 years. So early 2026 they come out with something that has, I don't know, the M4 or the M5 or whatever it is by then, and it improves things and it stays at a relatively similar price, maybe 2,500 or 3,000. But what I think they're also going to do, and what we've seen from some of the reports from the supply chain analysts, is that they're going to want to make a non-pro vision headset, a cheaper one. And an obvious way to do that is to, instead of pushing forward, to say, how do we get the Vision Pro 1 experience in a headset that is a fraction of the price, that is, $2,000, or maybe I'm being idealistic here, but over optimistic, sorry, but $1,500. And one of the obvious ways to do that, and I would strongly, strongly bet on this, is to use the A series chips from the iPhone instead of the M series chips that are in the iPad Pro and MacBook. So instead of pushing forward and say the Vision Air or the Vision Non-Pro, whatever you want to call it, having being more powerful, the goal may just be to get it to the same level of performance as the original Vision Pro while cutting the price. So if they're doing that, they're still going to have to, if they're going to have to support that new non-pro Vision headset, they're going to have to support the original Vision Pro for just as long because it's going to be at the same kind of performance. And Apple has been notoriously great in recent years at supporting its hardware for a very long time. Until very, very, very recently, the past year or so, iPhones had by far the longest software support of any smartphone. There was an era for a while in the 2010s where you would buy, a Samsung Galaxy phone and it would get like 18 months of software updates, and then Samsung would just abandon it. Meanwhile, Apple was giving like 5 or 7 years of updates for its iPhones. And from what we've seen, this Apple Silicon that they own, this M2, they don't have to go and ask anyone else for drivers for this or for support, or kind of to go and call up Intel or Qualcomm and get this supported. I expect that the Apple M series Apple Silicon laptops, MacBooks, and headsets are going to be supported for years and years and years because they have full end-to-end control of the software and the hardware. And they're going to want as many people in this Vision OS platform to be able to continue enjoying these things. Just like we've seen with iPhones, there will eventually come a time where they have to stop supporting this thing. But I expect for the majority of this decade, this thing is going to still be supported.
All right, so lots of pushback, lots of defense, and a correction to kind of my advice. I wanted to get inside the mindset there of the person who's trying to buy this and really wondering whether this thing is going to go into kind of a place of honor in their box of like gadgets uh, after 5 years, or whether it's like actually going to get real use. I like as someone who's lived through a generation of personal computing, right, where I've had to kind of sell the last headset or sell the last iPhone in order to afford the next generation device. This math is actually happening in people's heads, right? Am I going to actually be able to turn around and sell this thing in 6 months' time for anything close to what it's valued? Is a very serious question to weigh in your head. Um, and whether it's going to drop in cost within a year or within 6 months is another thing to consider. That's another thing that I was wondering about with the timeline. I went into the history books, dragged up that the iPhone dropped by at least $200 within just a few months of release back in 2007. And then a few months later is when the App Store launched, so that the following summer. So you had a period there where the only thing you could do with your iPhone was the apps that Apple actually included in the actual experience itself. So visual voicemail, the Maps app, I think YouTube was there at the base. Those basic things were all you could do out of the box with an iPhone for a very, very long time. And then it dropped by price within a few months. So we're what we're dealing with here is a device that's going to have very interesting things to do with it if you're a developer or an early adopter, but you're not necessarily going like I wonder whether you're actually going to be able to get work done with it within the first year. Like you might here was my question and why don't we get into the last subject here? Can we cover the last subject on the Apple news before we move on?
Well, yeah, I know. I just want to respond to that. I think this is a very interesting. Let's not just go off it. This is a very, very interesting conversation we're having here. The you make a great point about first generation Apple products. Just like some of our commenters are making good points where they say, look at the first generation Apple Watch. By all accounts, it was pretty bad and it got outdated very quickly. Anakazi's pointing out that the first generation iPad was as well. It's very accurate to say that a lot of first generation Apple products people have learned to avoid because they do have these compromises to get them out. Um, and I think in some ways that's going to apply to Vision Pro, but I don't think it's going to be in the same ways. I don't think it's going to be the compute or the features. I suspect from everything I know about this product and from all the rumors I've seen that the way this is going to age badly is the comfort. I think that we keep hearing these canaries in the coal mine from the testers being reported as saying that this thing does not feel great on your face after 30 minutes. That despite the fact that Apple is pitching this as for seated, long duration media consumption, it is simply too heavy and uncomfortable for that. And what we've also seen from some of the sources like Gurman is that Apple's number one priority for the successor is not give it a super duper faster processor or a higher resolution screen or extra lenses or super feature XL. No, their highest priority for the next Vision Pro is making it thinner and lighter and more comfortable for your face. In fact, some of these sources have suggested that Apple is willing to compromise other things to get that. They know that this is what's going to matter. So I think you're going to have a Vision Pro. This Vision Pro, it's not going to stop getting software updates. It's not going to feel outdated from a performance perspective, though obviously there are going to be more powerful headsets eventually. What's really going to feel outdated about this and what will make people feel the first generation Apple product tax is going to be the physical feeling on your face, that
I
500 or so grams that's pushing down as Apple comes out with these thinner and lighter versions over time.
So I want to talk about that last subject here about the 150 plus 3D movies at Vision Pro launch. So this was one last bit of the news here is that there's the library that Apple has in its movie store, and they're bringing that to bear with a lot of content available at launch. But this is where I wanted to bring the discussion. So is there any detail there but before I come back on this?
Just that Apple has said that there will be over 150 3D movies available at launch to rent from their Apple TV store, and also Disney Plus has confirmed that their Vision Pro app will contain some 3D movies from their library. So it looks like there'll be a lot of more 3D movies available on Vision Pro than I think any other product. I mean, 3D TVs died in 2016 and 2017. As you were discussing with me earlier, this could be a renaissance for 3D content, be that movies, be that games. This is finally the hardware that can make this content shine in the way that it simply never did on 3D TVs.
Yes, 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 yes. And now where I wanted to go with this is to wrap this all together is uh obviously some hands-ons out there for the Vision Pro. We are trying to figure out what our plan is here. But I wanted to play a hypothetical here. Is let's say we had two Vision Pros and we got you over to the United States and then we sent you back to London with a Vision Pro. Let's say hypothetically you're in London with a Vision Pro and I'm here in New York with a Vision Pro and we want to have a persona to persona FaceTime call. Are we going to be able to do that in the first year of release of the Apple Vision Pro? I don't have that answer yet. I don't think we have that answer yet. Now, let's take it a step further. Are we going to be able to watch Avatar: The Way of Water together in a virtual cinema in 2024, both of us wearing Apple Vision Pro?
Those are great questions. So, from what we know, FaceTime should work, but we're not going to see each other, at least at launch, as you know, to scale 3D avatars as we are now. And we're not going to see each other in like a spatial sense. What we will see is a rectangular window through which we will see the upper body and face of each other. And also, it looks like, if you bring your hands into view, they'll also be there. But it's kind of designed to be this windowed effect. What Apple did say at WWDC is they're working on full spatial personas where it will be an avatar like this, but that's not going to be there at launch. I believe maybe developers are allowed to experiment with it, but it's definitely not going to be in Apple's FaceTime. Now, as for SharePlay, whether that's going to support these Apple TV uh, content like movies and 3D movies, we haven't heard anything about that yet. There's been a confirmation that Vision OS supports SharePlay, that there are a lot of SharePlay features. There was a video at WWDC explaining to developers how to implement things like this, including with personas. But just today, we saw Apple announce a lot of the details behind their entertainment platform, and there was no mention of co-watching with personas. Will that be a feature within a year or two, though? You would have to bet yes. One thing we need to remember here is that this is going to launch with Vision OS 1.0, uh, but it's very possible that at this year's WWDC in June or whenever it happens to be, Apple is going to tease Vision OS 2.0. And we're going to, if you are someone who wants to opt into the beta, you're going to be able to opt into that. Just like every year when you watch those WWDC conferences, you see all of the new features coming to iOS for iPhones and iPad OS and Mac OS and Apple TV. And some of them are incredible. Some of them are things we've seen before on Android. Some of them are incredible new ideas that Apple have come up with and can only do because of their ecosystem integration. We're going to see that in June. We're going to see what's coming to Vision Pro in the next year in June.
Well, yeah, I think I'm doing a pretty good job here of keeping us on topic and not moving off. So I'm going to wrap up this Apple section here and just say that my questions to you on this whole Apple section are going to be the ones that matter the most when it comes to assessing where Meta is relative to where Apple is. We have rightly criticized Meta week in and week out for years now for the fragmented nature of their software ecosystem. They the Gear VR era, the Oculus Go that Kyle was praising earlier in the show, right? Back in that era, they had a system for buying movies and inviting friends over to watch them with you in that headset, right? Killed, hidden in a ditch out back, right? Like they buried it and killed it. Um, and they're going to have to do something new, right? They're going to have to rebuild that up from scratch. Well, how well Apple does internationally with these features, FaceTime calls, SharePlay, is going to tell how prepared Apple is for what Meta is doing in comparison. And we're not going to pull punches. We're going to compare them accurately. Like we've tried to set up multiplayer games from Europe to America, and depending on the game, it can be a good experience or a terrible experience, depending on the media and depending on how well the servers are run. We've got some exclusive news probably coming up in the weeks ahead on a completely unrelated subject to everything we're talking about now, but it's still the same idea that like the number of servers you have, the number of licenses you've made, the number of partnerships you have with content producers, right? Like all of that is going to come to bear when we have to explain who's better, Meta or Apple or Google, who's providing you more choice and options out there. Um, I'm really excited to talk about this next thing, and I want to talk about the people talking about the 3D content out there, right? Like there was a commenter out there saying if the super lightweight 3D glasses didn't work for TVs 10 years ago, why the heck is it going to work now? And I think we got to talk about the next bit of news to get some of this context there.
Yeah, yeah, we'll talk about that very shortly, but I agree that that's a very interesting thing to talk about, and we'll definitely talk about it then. The last thing I do want to just agree with you on is the software here. I am more excited for Vision OS than I am for Vision Pro, even though this is very impressive hardware. I The hardware can be done. Other people will come up with headsets that are as good as Vision Pro within the next 12 to 24 months. That is a certainty. But what I have no confidence in any other company doing but though maybe my expectations have been shot low by what I've seen from Meta, is delivering Vision OS and the Apple ecosystem that they're delivering here. The approach to this is just light years beyond Meta, and it's really, really interesting because I wonder how much this is going to influence Meta's future decisions. Is Meta going to realize what they've done here? They've built great headsets at great prices. They've built some SDKs for Unity that it's not always the SDK's fault, although they've been very, very fragmented. But the developer experience of building in Unity through Meta's SDK, through the Android build process, is very messy. The result is this completely fragmented ecosystem where everything in one app, from spatial audio to interactions to UI to everything, physics, is completely different from one app to the other. There's no Vision OS is going to be a complete change in that. There's the other problem, of course, is there just, as Ian was talking about, so few Meta first-party applications. Apple is bringing across all of their iPad apps. They're also bringing first-party content, like we talked about, with this ability to be in these environments and watch movies and 3D movies on a giant screen, to play these iPad apps. All of this first-party stuff from FaceTime to Freeform. And Meta has really done almost nothing. Try to ask yourself, what are the good first party apps, as in apps made by Meta, on your Quest? Not games, but actual apps. Horizon Workrooms, and that's it. Essentially, there are some other apps, but there's nothing else that you would consider a really great app, and that's crazy after almost a decade of owning Oculus.
Well, and what gets me is there's the joke that Meta begins its copying, right? Like as soon as the announcement is made, right? But like I do really wonder how many restructurings are left in Meta just this year, right? Meta is a company that restructures all the time. Their teams shift, but they need to be shifting towards building better software. And I imagine that requires more planning and getting the right people into the right places. So we'll see what happens here. I need to talk about the glasses thing. We need to get on to what I consider to be the biggest news of the week. Even though, yes, Apple Vision Pro is ahead of us and the pre-orders are coming, but I want to talk about the idea of the glasses of 3D TVs not working and why the hell would that work now on these big bulky headsets? And I think this is a perfect example. I owned one or two 3DSs over the years, but actually the 3DS I bought and I spent the most time with was the 2DS, right? Nintendo went and shipped multiple generations of this handheld game console. They shipped big ones, small ones, multiple ones, and the selling feature on the first generation was this like dial you could adjust to get the stereoscopy, glasses-free 3D effect looking okay for your vision, right? And there were all sorts of warnings on it. It was not a great visual experience. And I waited on buying the 3DS until they just came out with the 2DS, the 2D version of this thing, because I didn't like the stereo look of that little display. It looked the very first thing I would do with it is turn it off. I would go just to a flat screen. What is happening here on Quest, and how is that different from what I just described?
Yeah, so head-mounted displays of the type we have today with, flat panels and lenses magnifying them, one for each eye, are the ultimate 3D displays. You cannot the experience you get is far beyond what you would have got in a 3D movie in a cinema or in a 3D TV at home with glasses. And the as Anakazi has pointed out in the comments, the new 3DS had a camera that tracked the face to improve the 3D, but it still is not as visually comfortable as having a VR style headset that is adjusted for your interpupillary distance, that is giving you a true separate image per eye with no crosstalk whatsoever. The 3D glasses, you'll know, they made the content dim. There was always this minor eye strain there. There was ghosting. There are all kinds of issues with traditional 3D technology that just don't exist in a VR style headset. And so that brings us to this news that we reported on earlier this week, which is the CitraVR, a VR port of the Citra emulator, the 3DS emulator. And it's strange that this is called VR because it takes place in pass-through. So it really should be Citra AR or Citra MR, but that's beside the point. The point here is that what you get is a 3DS where you have the bottom screen here that you can
More
interact
power
with.
to this developer. I'm proud of them for keeping the VR in their name. They're more VR and more VR and more names. I'm officially a proponent of it. Thank you.
Sure, but it's not VR. You're not in a virtual environment, but that's beside the point. The point is you get the bottom screen that is interactable with your controllers by pointing, and you get this top screen that's rendered in 3D. So instead of having this small 3D display that has this kind of primitive 3D auto stereoscopic display, you have this large screen that gives you this kind of perfect 3D. And I tried this out and it was incredible. It really is great to play these games that were designed for 3D on a giant virtual screen. This is going to be provide hours and hours of fun gameplay for people that use this. There is a massive library of high quality games that are made by Nintendo or their partners or by third party companies. And you can sideload it on your Quest next week for free. And obviously, to legally obtain 3DS games, you have to use a hacked 3DS, and other people are going to use other methods of obtaining them online, which we do not endorse, and CitraVR does not endorse. But I should point out that, let's all be honest, that's how the majority of people do use emulators, while we don't endorse it.
Yeah, this is a tricky area for us to always talk about when it comes to how people actually can use these things versus how they're like promised to use or how they work at a technical level. The thing I want to call out, and our comments are really going off on just the overall feature set here, is Apple has made a lot of buzz around their photo format, the spatial video format, or what's it called? Is it called spatial video? Yeah, they're making a lot of news around the spatial video format, and here we are with an indie dev, a former Meta employee, building what to me looks like the gaming equivalent of bringing like an old form of media into VR, right? Like you're bringing if Apple's spent all this money and time to bring photography and videography into spatial computing, this is classic gaming, stereoscopic classic gaming, brought into modern VR headsets. I love it so much. It's so phenomenal to imagine this rebirth of this content in VR. Like if I'm going to be running around VR and want like a pocket handheld, I'm gonna want it to be a 3DS. Like it's such a capable machine.
Yeah, and you just have this existing library of these games that were built for 3D that, some of them have this incredible depth effect. And as you say, it's fascinating to see this happen from these two companies simultaneously. On Vision Pro, you have 3D movies and TV shows being brought in to the best way possible to watch them on an enormous screen of your choosing, either in a fully virtual environment or in your pass-through environment. While on Quest, we get this developer bringing the 3DS gaming library. What I wonder is, will we see Apple support iPad games 3D on Vision Pro? So, if you're not aware, Vision Pro is going to run nearly all iPad apps from the App Store, including a bunch of the games on iPad. And the iPad these days, you may think of iPad games as like Candy Crush, but remember that those high performance iPads these days have M2 chips in them. There are serious full fledged games that actually run on iPad now. You'd be surprised at how many AAA style games actually do have iPad versions. So you'll be able to play these on a giant virtual screen. How many steps is it going to take for Apple to say, without having to build a full spatial VR port, we're going to let developers just make a 3D version. So it's still in a rectangular container, but it's three-dimensional and you get those layers just like the 3DS, except with iPad games. That's something that Unity says they're actually working on support for. So that could be something that we see in year 2 or 3 or whatever of Vision Pro. And I'll be watching WWDC in June very closely to see that, because this really just opened my eyes to what this can do for gaming. I also have tried a 3DS. I didn't find it visually comfortable. There just was something straining about pretty much every 3D technology I've tried, except for one at CES last year. I can't remember the name of it, but there are some laptops that have those auto stereoscopic displays that look pretty good now. I believe Nima is working on those. But from anything I've tried in the past before that, this just is such a better way to see 3D.
Yeah, so people in our comments are sort of having their imaginations firing off exactly the way your imagination is firing off. The realization of just how much of gaming is unlocked by this format, right? People wanting Steam to do it. You're talking about Apple doing something like this. I would love to see hardware integrated with this in various ways. But just the idea that I could carry this around with me and the stereoscopy, the 3D is better than I've ever seen it before. Just it's so exciting. There's so many cool ideas. And then I want to go back to the last topic, the 3D movies, right? The people saying that if the thin glasses of a few years ago on those 3D DVDs didn't succeed, why would they work today on big bulky headsets? Well, brightness is going to help. Uh, these headsets are bright, and the limitations of those old TVs. Um, I wouldn't want to look at the 3D on those TVs for very long, and I wouldn't ever want to buy a ticket to the movie theater, because you would sit in the movie theater for about 3 minutes before you'd start noticing a little bit of strain in your eyes, and you realize, is this actually darker than the normal picture? I can't make anything out. The dark areas of the screen are all out of you can't make out any of the detail. And then you realize that you're viewing 3D images on a system that was not tuned for 3D images. That's no longer the case with a VR headset. You have a system that is built for brightness from the ground up for both of your eyes, and everything is built for both of your eyes. And this can give birth not just for 3DS games, but this can be the way that we were always meant to see all of these top tier 3D movies that were made a few years ago.
Yeah, to put it bluntly, the answer is that the 3D doesn't suck anymore. The 3D sucked on 3D TVs and it doesn't now. But the other reasons that people will want to watch this is even the reasons that they would want to watch non 3D content, because we're talking a lot about 3D, but many of the entertainment use cases Apple is pitching for this headset, Vision Pro, are just traditional content. And with that, you get in something that can fit into your backpack, you get your own enormous cinema screen that is personal, that gives you spatial audio that can work with the new AirPods Pro 2 with USB-C to give you really high quality audio there that you can bring on a plane instead of having to watch that tiny little back of the seat screen on the plane and select between their movies. You can load on your own content and go into your completely own immersed environment. The limitation there is what I was saying before, though. It's comfort. That is a real factor, and we cannot ignore that. But that is why it's going to be Apple's biggest priority. Because if you want to do these kind of use cases, you need to drive hard on comfort. I think Meta abandoned these use cases in the past because the hardware wasn't there yet. I think Meta has probably assumed that the use cases are just not suitable. They may have just looked at their data and gone, oh, people didn't use this for long. They didn't retain it. Therefore, it's useless. Not realizing that the reason was A, the headsets weren't high resolution enough back when they tried this with Gear VR and Go. Apple solved the resolution problem here. These are 4K, near 4K OLED micro displays. This is sufficient resolution for this. It's not Retina. No one's claiming that, but it's sufficient for this kind of use case. Uh, the issue they haven't solved is comfort, and we're going to need a headset that is a lot more comfortable for people to want to watch this for hours on end. The other issue some people point out is battery life, but I don't think that's as big as an issue as people make it out. Apple has actually said that for movie watching, Vision Pro can get 2.5 hours of battery life, not just two. So that'll get you most movies. But other than that, people are going to use this thing plugged in a lot. Let's be honest. If you've got a tether coming off your head, it's not a big step to add a tether to your tether. It doesn't change much. How many people do you know that sit and use their iPhone plugged in anyway? They're sitting on their couch, just scrolling their iPhone or their iPad or their Mac or their other, Android phone or tablet or Windows PC, and it's plugged in the whole time. Plenty
Yeah.
of people.
No, no, let's be clear. David Heaney and I live in the future, where we've got Anchor Prime battery packs that tell us what our rate of power both into and out of the battery pack is. And I've talked about it previously on the show. If you go to a Pokemon Go event where people want to enjoy a mobile game for an entire day, you look across the entire field of people out there, you'll see battery packs everywhere you see. Battery packs are like a necessity, common in purses and bags everywhere, I think, nowadays. And I don't see the trend going away anytime soon. I think the battery packs get even bigger in the next couple of years because of things like this. Um, we ready to talk about anything else here from the comments?
Just want to bring up one comment from Apu KDCFC. Not sure how to say that name or if it even can be said, but they're saying they expected Sony to show more love for watching movies on PlayStation VR 2. And I think that's a great point because I would have expected that too. PlayStation has a bunch of media apps. It's designed to work as an alternative to Apple TV or Google TV these days. You can get Netflix and a lot of the other services on PlayStation. It's got a web browser. Sony owns its own movie division that has a bunch of content they could offer to this, including 3D movies. Uh, it just looks like they haven't focused on that. It is Sony's gaming division that releases PlayStation VR 2,
No.
Sony Interactive Entertainment. There maybe just isn't enough crosstalk between there. Maybe it is another thing with comfort where the PlayStation VR 2 is probably, for most people, not super comfortable for that use case. But for other people, it is. It depends on whether a Halo strap works well for your head. Maybe it's a resolution problem where, that OLED display, as we've talked about, because it's pen tile, is a bit soft. You don't really get that sharpness you would get from the LCD displays or the RGB OLEDs. The lenses aren't fantastic when it comes to things like sweet spot. Still seems like they should offer. Anakazi saying that I expect more from Sony in all areas. If we had time to talk about that, we would, but we do not want to talk about that in another episode.
Yeah, D1360 making this comment. I wonder what project could come out if Guy Godin and Amanda Watson teamed up. It's going to something we've kind of dreamed of on this show. We've wanted to imagine what it is like to have a thumb drive in VR, a pocket full of content that you want to show to a room full of avatars. So whether that be games, movies, photos, how do you go about what protocols go about sharing that content with the other people in the room? And I think that's what that question is wondering. And we wanted it years ago, and every new headset makes it likelier that we're going to get it. Each of these projects, like There is something really magical happening in the VR community right now between everything you're seeing with Flat to VR, the Unreal mods, the incredible work being done to bring mods into VR over on the Quest ecosystem. Then there's the Steam Workshop work done in Half-Life Alyx, and then you've got projects like this that just what gets me is Kyle went to CES, a bunch of people went to CES. I canceled my CS trip right before we went, and I think I actually made the right call. The only thing that I missed out on at CES that I wished I had seen was Vario. We're going to try to get a Vario hands on as soon as possible. And then this 3DS demo, this incredible 3DS demo, which is going to be available at home and available for us to test, just the same as if we had tried it face to face. I think that is telling. I think the fact that CES was not a great show for hardware is telling. It happens in certain years when the big companies suck the air out of the room. When, and this Apple, Meta, if you're not a company producing a platform on that scale, or a Google, if you're not a platform company producing and investing on that scale, you're going for a different market. You're going for a different set of audiences than those other companies are going for, and that's what we saw at CES.
Yeah, I think it's a great point when you say that there is this really vibrant community going on with mods and the UAVR mod, and now with CitraVR and with all of those ports. And the last thing I was going to point out that might be related to Vision Pro is that obviously as things stand, a lot of that is not going to come to Vision Pro. The side loading there is going to be a lot more restrictive. Maybe people do get it through Apple's test flight system, but it's going to be a lot more frictionful than getting it onto Quest. It's, for many years, one of the biggest advantages for some people of an Android phone was that you could just so easily put on a Game Boy or a DS emulator, for example. That is, I know people who bought Android phones for that exact reason, that they didn't want to have to jailbreak their device just to do something like that. But there's going to be a very interesting development here in that Apple is going to be soon mandated by the European Union to allow sideloading and alternative app stores. That could change the Vision Pro landscape in Europe in a
Although,
very different way, though it's
did you?
not going to happen in the United States.
Yeah, yeah, I saw that right before we came in here that Tim Sweeney was complaining on Twitter that that is lost in the United States, that effort. Um,
It could be
do
fascinating
you?
though. You could see Vision Pro have a Quest like side Quest ecosystem, but only in Europe, where that doesn't happen in the United States. That could
Right?
be, you could see a divergence here.
Are we going to have to VPN into each other's computers in order to have full access to the library of content that our headsets can hype? This is so nightmarish. This is like not the way I that's did I just technically describe the way we would have to watch certain shows together? I remember being at like a whatever that Texas game conference is for id Games, and I remember talking to one of the executives there, and he was complaining about piracy of their games while also talking about Doctor Who and how much I love Doctor Who. And I remember during that period there was no official streaming service for Doctor Who in the United States, so I'm off the record, or just didn't say it was off the record, but I was like, how do you get your content for Doctor Who? Right? Like, how people stand on piracy is it's always like it's a quiet thing that no one wants to talk about, right? Like, but a lot of people have hard drives full of personal content that they've ripped off of DVDs or uh, CDs over the last 20 years. And it's kind of silly that you can't have a room like this and play a jukebox full of a playlist for everyone in the room. That's where we've gone from the era of peer-to-peer networking to today. And our comments are wondering if something else is going to show up to show us a different future.
Yeah, that's going to be one of those situations that we've talked about before when it comes to co-watching that we've discussed earlier. The idea of sitting beside each other's avatars and watching things. It's not a technology problem. All of these companies could build this in a 6 months if they wanted to. They could have, you could have an app on Quest where you're sitting beside each other and watching all of your content from all your streaming services. Like, engineers could build it. It's an intellectual property law problem. It's a copyright law problem. It is a problem of the legal sphere, not the technical. And I very much so wonder how the proliferation of XR headsets slash spatial computers will change that, or maybe drive an impetus, because you do have this kind of middle ground of, if I'm in real physical life with you and I walk to your house and sit beside you on your couch, I can watch your streaming service you've paid for and I haven't paid anything for it. No one questions that. But as Ian's pointing out, why is that so different in the virtual realm? Why, when I visit your virtual home, can you not put on your virtual television and play Netflix without me having to be subscribed? I'm not, yes, technically that is streaming Netflix to a device, and there are many, many concerns there about how that could enable piracy. But fundamentally, that's something that consumers are going to want over time, and there's going to be this huge demand for, just let us do it, let us pay and do this.
Yeah, well, we've got a lot of people imagining all sorts of interesting things in our comments. We will come back to it and follow up on exactly what platform is best to share content in. Big shout out to Big Screen. Big Screen working on that for years. That's been their North Star, and it's their North Star when it comes to the Big Screen Beyond. So I just want to praise Big Screen officially, like formally, before we move on. We're ready to talk about this AR glasses section before we close out for the day.
Yeah, so we have two stories here relating to AR glasses to end off the show here. The first is just the essential confirmation, or the all confirmation from Google, that they're no longer working on their own. So Google had layoffs last week, and they confirmed that a few hundred roles are being eliminated in devices and services, with the majority of the impacts on the first party AR hardware team. While we are making changes to our first party AR hardware team, Google continues to be deeply committed to other AR initiatives, such as AR experiences in our products and product partnerships. So, reading between the lines there, that is all but confirmation from Google that they are no longer working at their own first party AR glasses. They acquired North a few years ago, which is a very promising startup working on smart glasses and AR glasses. And in a tale as old as time, big tech company acquires promising startup, and a few years in doesn't understand what to do with it and fires everyone, or sorry, lays everyone off, or moves them to a different project and closes it down. It is a tragedy. There have been many times in the past decade that a promising startup has been absorbed into a company like Google and had this happen to them. Uh, but that doesn't mean Google isn't working on AR glasses at all in another way. What we have heard from reports from the likes of Business Insider's Hugh Langley is that while Google has killed its own smart glasses hardware, it plans to work with partners, just like, as we talked about in the last episode, just like Google is working with a partner on their XR headset, Samsung. So Samsung is going to handle the hardware, building their own kind of Vision Pro competitor style thing, while Google handle the software, the platform, the core tech like the tracking. From Hugh Langley's reporting, Google will do the same with glasses. So they're going to build Android XR for headsets like Samsung's, and Android Micro XR for glasses. And instead of making their own Pixel glasses or Pixel headset, it'll be Samsung headset powered by Android XR, or Samsung glasses powered by Android Micro XR. And it's interesting that that will essentially just mirror Google's strategy for the first years of Android, where they didn't have Pixel, they had Nexus, but it was mostly a thing for developers and ultra enthusiasts. And they just provided the software and the platform. It just seems weird, because what they learned from that was that eventually they should have a Pixel line. And I wonder if they're just going to follow the exact same pattern again, where 5 or 10 years from now, you do get the Pixel glasses and the Pixel headset, but when it's already too late and all of the other hardware companies have taken the market.
A few comments on our last section here. David Wyatt here saying letting people share their content is nice in theory, but beyond the intellectual property law, it's tricky in multiplayer scenarios because people will misuse and play things people don't want to and shouldn't see here. I, of course, have moved to New York recently, and the concept of people walking around with boom boxes or blasting songs out their car radio is new to me. It's something that's pretty frequent in New York, and uh, I want it in VR, even though I don't. Right, like it should. like it's such a divisive thing, right? Like someone's having a certain kind of vibe. They want everyone to listen to their music. Why can't you do that also in VR and have certain people that you just end up muting if they're too loud? Uh, that's I don't know, but we'll see how things work out in social spaces. David Wyatt there, like that's we're dealing with real time. It's remarkable to me that like what was it, Altspace and Horizon both rolled out very similar user safety bubble features within about like 6 months or 2 months of each other, and then, of course, Altspace shut down. But this idea of being able to control your space is still developing, and we're gonna have to see where it goes in the future, but, uh, I AirDrop, right, is the real world equivalent of this. They've had to change the way AirDrop functions several times, I think, because of misuse, in a very similar fashion.
Yeah, I don't find that a compelling argument against this at all. That's an argument for not allowing people to share things in public spaces, like public VR chat rooms. What we're talking about here is a private space. It's like being on a FaceTime call or a phone call or a one-to-one Discord session with your friend. And I mean, if you don't like your friend, if they're posting things you don't like, get a different friend, or just tell them to not be rude. But that, yeah, so surely doing that in public is completely different. But what we're asking for here is that if I am in one country and my friend is in another country, or even if I'm just 50 or 100 miles away, I can put on my headset, my friend puts on his headset or her headset, and we watch content together. I don't see people
I
putting
think
on bad
the
things
idea
as a.
once you've got a room code the idea once you've got a room code or, like, a room name, that's a private experience that you should have access to some level of, like, room radio, right? Like, or an AirPlay TV that you can all share and throw content onto.
Yeah, I mean, you have that on FaceTime calls. I don't see why there has to be a room code. And again, we'll have this argument before, but when you FaceTime someone, you don't tell them, here's my FaceTime room code. You click on their name and you click start call. That's the ideal UX for this is I'm in my headset. I have my friends list. I click join on my friend. Their phone app rings or their headset rings. They put on their headset. They're sitting beside me. I say, "Oh, look, let's watch a movie." I point to the movie or, whatever your input method is. I play the movie and they see it. Or I open Netflix, they see the Netflix. I don't think, people could
Sure,
send bad things is no more of an argument than my friend might message me something I don't like. We shouldn't have instant messengers. I mean,
hmm. I remember this UI of just isn't it the UI of our contacts basically like we put our phones together and then hit approve? But this idea, I remember this one of the first apps in the very early years of the App Store was basically having two phones right next to each other, and you could slide a file from this phone to this phone. And if they did it right, if the latency was good enough, it would appear on the other phone, this file, this little square, exactly in sync. And it felt like magic. I want that in VR. I want it across devices where
again, it's not a
we've
technical
talked
problem.
about
There's
it for
n-
so
there's no
much.
there's no technical barrier to anything we're talking about. It's not difficult. I
Yeah.
mean, there is some difficulty to it. I'm not saying it's trivial, but video streaming, encoding a video stream and sending it over and decoding it is not magic in 2024. There's no technical barrier here. It's entirely just an issue of IP law. But should we talk
Yeah.
about the AR glasses again?
Yeah, let's get back to it because Google's two platforms there that they've rumored to have, right, one for VR, one for AR, is confounding. Um, I've got to talk about um alchemy, and I think we should go back to earlier in our show where we were talking about augments. What is the Google equivalent of augments? What are widgets in your real world from Google? And then there's a couple core services like mapping, real-time translation, Google Lens. Real-time translation, there's multiple layers, right? There's the idea that you could wear glasses or like a uh, Vision Pro type glasses that actually block out what you see and recreate everything. Google has had for years that startup that they bought that overlays text in your language on menus, on any kind of billboard you're looking at. All that stuff, in addition to just audio translation, would be killer on both VR and AR. Either set of devices, it would be extremely useful. So I see a future for Google doing some of these things in some way, shape, or form, but where is the magic that Alchemy Labs is doing with hand tracking? Where is Job Simulator at the OS level? Where is where is that? And I was thinking about these augments and these widgets, and I want Alchemy to do widgets. I want augments, but Alchemy.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll see a lot of that when it comes to the Samsung XR headset. But when it comes to these AR glasses, these, as you've sort of hinted at here, we're talking about very different use cases in many ways, where it's this outdoor navigation, it's this translation. And I think to discuss why this is going to be quite a while, and maybe one of the reasons why Google has cancelled their own internal project, we should maybe talk about the next project and the next topic, and then we can kind of spin it back in to bring it back to Google, because this is a really fascinating one, and you can find it on uploadvr.com right now, which is that TCL has announced that they will crowdfund for next month the first ever standalone AR glasses. And by standalone, I mean it in the same way I mean a Quest is standalone. There is no external computing. There is nothing external. You can technically call Apple Vision Pro standalone too, but that's debatable by some people, whether the tethered battery. The point is, it's all still connected to each other and it's all the same device. Uh, this has the computing on board and the battery on board, and we haven't seen that from AR glasses before. If you were with us last week, you'll know that we talked about the X-Real Air 2 Ultra AR glasses as one of the first ever AR glasses. But what's not shown in this picture is that these are cable tethered to a Samsung Galaxy S23, and it handles the battery and the processing. This does not have onboard full processing or a battery. Now, these TCL glasses that we're talking about today do have that. So they are technically going to be a first-in-class product, a first to market. And I think this will probably, unless a competitor comes out of nowhere, they will make their way into the history books. That said, I don't think it will actually be a compelling product, because to get this, to achieve what they've got here, fully standalone AR glasses, doesn't require a phone, doesn't require a compute unit or an external battery. Everything is built in. They have had to make some heavy, heavy compromises. So firstly, this uses the same XR2 chipset as Quest 2 and Pico 4. That's really interesting to see them use that chipset, not only because it's outdated, but because it's more powerful than what you might have expected from glasses like this. It also goes to show just how small that actual chip is, that they can actually fit in to these strap arms here, that XR2 chip. But I imagine it will probably be heavily downclocked. That's not the strangest part, though. The other thing is that this will be the first ever product that isn't a $150,000 TV that uses. Oh, I'm back now. I just lost tracking temporarily. The first product that isn't a $150,000 TV that uses micro LED displays, micro LED. So that's remarkable, because we've been talking about on this show and on Upload VR for years, micro LED, this future display technology that no one had worked out how to mass produce. And that's still mostly the case, because this is going to use the first generation micro LED displays, and it has a resolution of 480p, 640 by 480, which is pathetic. The X-Real glasses we talked about just a second ago that are tethered to a Galaxy S23, they're 1080p. That's, a significant difference. This is going to have a very, very limited resolution. What you get from that, though, is that because these micro LED displays are much more power efficient than even OLED micro displays, it's the most power efficient display technology ever. They can run on an internal battery without the need for anything external. They can also get it up to 1500 nits compared to the 500 nits that you get from those X-Real glasses, which is really interesting. But again, there are some other compromises here. These are really small displays with a really low resolution. And because of that, the field of view is actually the biggest Achilles heel of all. Yes, the 480p resolution is not the worst thing about this product. It's the field of view. It is just tiny. You can see it visualized here, 25 degrees diagonal. This has, it's like they've what TCL has said here And Rayneo is technically like an incubated startup from TCL. It's unclear exactly what the relationship is there, but it doesn't matter. This is being branded as a TCL product. What they've basically said here is, let's make the first standalone AR glasses at all costs. The compromises they've made here and the extremely limited nature of the field of view and resolution that you get from the micro LED displays that you need to get standalone glasses should heavily hint at why Google reportedly cancelled their AR glasses product. And as we just talked about, that's basically confirmed by Google. Why Apple reportedly indefinitely shelved theirs, and why Meta has been pouring billions and billions and billions, tens of billions of dollars over the past 8 years into trying to build this and still doesn't have a product. And why reportedly Meta will only ship a demonstrator next year of 1,000 units with micro LED displays, and will go back to LCOS, which is kind of like LCD micro displays, for their actual product. So, people, I remember a few years ago on this show, we were saying things like this. We were saying, look, the 2020s are going to be for headsets with pass-through, XR headsets, spatial computers, whatever you want to call them. But we're not going to see the kind of AR glasses people want from science fiction in this decade. That's going to be for the 2030s. And I remember we got some pushback on that. There were people that said, no, you're being too pessimistic. By 2025, we're going to get all of these AR glasses and the big companies will do it. The reality is, if you want to ship an AR glasses with the technology of today, this is what the technology just doesn't exist. It's like trying to build an iPhone in the 1990s. The technology to build the kind of standalone AR glasses that everyone really wants, with the field of view and battery life and resolution that people want in a standalone form factor, you can do it, but this is what you get.
Can you put the field of view one back on there? I want to try to do a visualization here so people can imagine it. When we talk about the use case of live translation, you have to imagine the user facing away from you and looking at a person with this as their field of view, right? And as they're standing there or sitting there, whatever, the person that they're looking at is moving around in their field of view. And there needs to be a space around wherever they're looking at for a couple lines of text that show in your language what that person is saying to you in near real time. And maybe it's right over their head, maybe it's right above. But when we talk about the field of view of all these devices, it has to pull that off. You have to be able to move your head around a little bit. The person has to be in the middle of your field of vision. You're looking at them. And then somewhere around them, you're seeing the translated text, or in accessibility settings, you could be seeing live captions, and that would be incredibly useful for a huge number of people who need help understanding and hearing what people around them are saying. Um, yeah, any comments you want to respond to?
Yeah, you're absolutely right to say that a narrow field of view in glasses like this, it's not just that it's visually annoying and looks bad. It's that it means that you can no longer keep track of which virtual user interfaces and objects are present and where are they. Because as you're panning your head around the room, you're only seeing this tiny little postage stamp view of them. That you don't get even the peripheral context that you get in VR. Some people would even complain that, in VR with this Quest 3 field of view, you don't have enough field of view to keep track of what objects are around you. Imagine trying to do it with this. The reason Ian is bringing up this real-time translation use case is that is something that TCL is promising for this. They are saying that they will have subtitles that translate other people speaking in other languages floating underneath their head. They're also saying there'll be navigation, so that you're on your bike was the example they gave, or I presume walking around would be the same, and you see the kind of floating blue arrows that point you down the street. These flagship use cases for AR glasses, but it's going to be really strange to
So,
use this with 25 degrees
but
of field of view.
I need before you take this, get rid of this. I want to talk also about images, right? You remember the feature that you recently talked about that MetaQuest, what 3 has, where it will actually render a visual out to here, is it? To get you, so when you want to show the full frame of a vertical Quest 3 image, it looks like this, right? Is
Yeah,
that how
you
it
you,
works?
you mean casting 2.0 will render out to here so that you can show it in widescreen. Yeah, it will render out to here.
So you get like a super wide screen out to here that's really close to the human eye. And then over, this is my excuse. David said I couldn't do it last week. The Ray-Ban glasses images are like, I want to say they're like to here, the way they capture a big vertical frame of your field of vision. This is this is a really useful chart for discussing the capture systems that we've got. We need to overlay those on because whether it's VR or whether it's the real world, capturing the media, capturing what you're seeing is like is a really fundamental part of each of these devices. And it's comparing what you actually see uh, to what you actually record is going to be something we're going to come back again, again, and again, and again, and again, right? How many videos do we see on the internet that aren't representative of the actual experience in headset because of the mismatch we're discussing right here?
Yeah, that's a great point. If you look at our article on this, you'll see some footage of these intended use cases, but all of those concepts and visualizations are completely unrealistic because of this. They are showing all of these elements appearing here and here and here, but you're not going to see them. So that's a huge thing to point out. On the topic of the Ray-Ban Meta glasses, the use cases that they do provide, TCL is promising these glasses will provide too. They have a camera on them for 16 megapixel photos and 1080p 30 fps videos, and they can take calls and play music and things like that. So you do get all those use cases. They also are saying that you're going to get 3 hours of battery life in AR mode, or display on mode, and they also have a display off mode that can last much longer, where it is just acting like a Ray-Ban Meta glasses. So um, this is fascinating. It is like, regardless of all the criticism that we're throwing at this and leveling this, it is historically interesting. And, again, as I said, as long as no other company comes out of nowhere and launches something before this, somewhere in the history books, someone's going to write that the first standalone AR glasses and the first with micro LED displays was the TCL Ray Neo X2. And that's interesting, even if the product isn't something that I would ever recommend anyone actually get.
I want to. Do we have anything else on this? I want to do that chart one more time. I want to throw out one more thought on that would be really that I want to think about. Right? Remember, Andrew Bosworth has talked about vertical to value, vertical field of view for everything. I want to talk about if what we're arguing about is how much can you get beyond this in a transparent optic? Can you get it out to here? Or, yeah, Magic Leap 2 is where we are today, right? What happens if you rotate it like this and have it right here, and and you've got sort of a horizontal strip here over the top third of a person's field of vision, and then you've got kind of like over your eye line, you've got a good little pop-up dialogue over this top third everywhere that's in the top field of your vision. So I guess I'm just saying it's really stupid this way, this postage stamp thing. Everyone in our comments is noticing the way this image shows this weird little thing in the middle. But over the next few years, I think we're going to see a lot of interesting placements for the AR field view is what I'm getting at, right? I don't know that
Yeah,
necessarily putting a limited field of view AR content in the center of your vision is always the best idea. Moving it up to the top or moving it down to the bottom is interesting to me as well.
it's an interesting idea. I'm not 100% sure whether that is dictated by the limitations of the waveguides and the optical design there. That might be something that no matter what, they're just kind of stuck with at the moment, given the designs. It's good to point out that Magic Leap 2 here is the state of the art when it comes to transparent optics. But to achieve that, they are obviously getting, a much larger form factor. Magic Leap 2 is not glasses, it is goggles. They officially refer to it as a headset. I think goggles is probably the better way to say it. But yeah, it's we're going to be watching so closely over the next few years to see where is the innovation on transparent optics. Do we get to the point that by the end of the decade they can get competitive with these pass-through headsets? We've talked about before how it looks like Meta, their glasses that they show off this year, potentially the high end ones that are too expensive to produce, might have a field of view quite similar to Magic Leap 2, perhaps slightly wider, whereas the glasses that they intend to ship as a product reportedly in 2027 will actually be more similar to the X-Rail glasses here when it comes to field of view, maybe slightly wider. Imagine here to down there. So it's going to be fascinating. But what I can say with a decent degree of certainty, based on following this quite closely, is that this decade is going to be the decade of pass through, camera pass through onto lenses and displays. The Apple Vision Pro approach, the Quest 3 approach, it's the cameras are going to get better. The pass through reprojection technology is going to get better. The chips that process those cameras are going to get more powerful. By the time that this transparent tech catches up, think of how far the opaque tech will have gone. Think of how incredible that's going to be. Think of how the field of view is going to get wider. The fidelity is going to get higher. Look at Vario XR4. Look at what they're doing, where they have autofocus cameras that are guided by eye tracking, where you look somewhere and the camera dynamically adjusts its focus to what you're looking at. That's the kind of innovation we're going to see in these opaque headsets, and cheaper. It still, for the foreseeable future, will be cheaper to deliver this. Meta Quest 3 is $500. Magic Leap 2 is on the order of $3,000. Something I don't remember off the top of my head. It's somewhere between 2,500 and 3,500.
Yeah, I think that's moving to the end of our show. Any comments there? I've got a couple last things I want to tease here that hopefully we have everyone tune in the future on. But any comments you want to respond to before we close out?
Just having a look now, I think my Quest 2 is dying. This is one of the longest shows we've ever done. I think even though it's not out of par, I think it's just dying after being on for.
Yeah, I'm at 17% here. So, and the comments this week, as always, have been incredible. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, David.
There is one comment I want to point out where Harry Underwood said that they'd be willing to live with glasses tethered to phones if it meant that you combined the function of the Ray-Bans with the X-Rail Air 2 Ultra. I respect that. My Quest 2 is dying badly here. Personally, I don't like the idea that I would have to have a tether coming all the way down into my phone that realistically is going to take over your phone's compute and battery and drain the hell out of your phone battery. I don't like that idea personally. Maybe some people are okay with that. We saw with Samsung Gear VR and Google Daydream, and in a lesser way, Google Cardboard, people don't want to give up their phone and drain its battery just to use an XR device. I'm skeptical that smartphones will go the same way. I think it's probably the reason that despite all the rumors, Vision Pro is not a iPhone powered headset. There were so many rumors for years that Apple would build a headset that did exactly that. It was tethered to your iPhone. Your iPhone did all that, and they had a lightweight headset. I think there are very, very good reasons that Apple didn't go for that. I think people do not want to compromise their phone just for another device. Just like you don't want to have to plug your phone into your smartwatch, and just like the iPad doesn't work by plugging into your iPhone, nor does any other device. That's not the way people want their devices to work.
Yeah, with that, I just want to say thank you to David Heaney for his incredible work this week, getting out the news, covering everything in depth. Great work out there. Sorry, my headset froze there for a second. We've had some big news over this last week and a half that came from both big players and indies, fans building ideas that are just near and dear to their heart. And we're so thankful to our sources for coming to us, trusting us with news. I want to say thank you to them, as well as just a call out to everyone out there. If you have interesting projects in VR, email us at tips@uploadvr.com. If there's something we should see, there's also a contact us page at uploadvr.com. We're always curious. We don't always respond. We're very busy, but we do see those messages, and you can always reach out to us multiple times if we don't respond the first time. The thing I wanted to tease is, yes, Walkabout Mini Golf is adding Around the World in 80 Days later this week as part of its planned trilogy of Jules Verne-inspired courses. And we've got a tour video. It is gorgeous. It's gorgeous. It's incredible. We'll have a full design walkthrough as well as some teases in that design walkthrough for the future. Um, If you have any news in particular that you think should be in VR download or in future shows that we do at uploadvr.com, please do use that contact us thing. I'm going to leave us with one more tease that we've got news a couple weeks out that isn't walkabout related, isn't Mighty Coconut, that they are excited by the idea of breaking it on the VR download. They're excited about us going and hitting publish on an article. At the moment we come into this studio and then having a show live with you while we talk about that news. I I want to see more of that in 2024. It's really, really exciting to think that there's developers out there, creators who trust us to be the platform for their news, and we want to do that more this year. So thank you so much. We'll see you in the future. David is warping in and out of reality over here. I don't know. I don't know if we're gonna hear him. I see his avatar. I don't know if we're live. Are we live? I don't know. I've got a red box over here. Still live. He'll kill me at some point. He'll kill the stream at some point. I'll just die off mid sentence. This is where I am now? There was a Are You Afraid of the Dark episode that really disturbed me about a kid getting stuck inside of a virtual pinball machine. Not a virtual pinball machine, just a real pinball machine. What happened to David? How did his headset die and his OBS? This is weird. I can't. We've got 80 people watching us right now. I, I don't have legs. No legs. I was hoping David would surprise me. Did you guys see me twiddling my thumbs? The twiddling the thumbs is really nice on the Quest 3. Maybe David's just going to come back when his battery comes back and say goodbye and then end the stream. That would be pretty impressive. If that is your plan, David. I mean, he's in control of the stream. He's streaming this. He's watching this on his computer right now. He knows what's happening. There's 180 people still watching, so their curiosity is equal to my own. It's just my reality dies. No, my reality will continue even if the stream dies. It's just you all stop watching me. If you die in the stream, you die in real life. I don't like thinking about that. Okay, if we talk too long, Kyle will pop in here. Kyle will pop in here and rescue me. Wait. The tablet came back.
Hello again.
Welcome back, David. What happened?
Oh, just my headset crashed, so it rebooted there.
Well, I was saying goodbye to everyone, and they're all very, very entertained by my my effort to fill airtime in purgatory here. This personal hell you built for me.
I'm looking in the comments here. Oh God, did you stand up?
I did briefly stand up because I never know when you're going to drop legs on me. It's a surprise even to me, and I thought I'd show off that we don't have legs yet.
Truly terrifying. But yes, I mean, I guess the show is over, so I just came back to say goodbye, which is strange, but I got the headset up again. The Quest 2 was clearly dying. I think it was out of RAM for some reason. Probably a memory leak, probably my fault. But anyway, we haven't had a show this long before. That's how you find out a memory leak. You get 2.5 hours into a show and you find out. So anyway, thank you so much, everyone. We hope to be back here next week as usual. I think we've been doing really well at keeping this show going consistently. We didn't years ago, but we've been keeping consistent on a Tuesday. We can't wait to talk to you next week after we, and I hope many others, or I expect many others, have pre-ordered Apple Vision Pro. It's happening on Friday. It's hard to believe.
We've got 170 people watching in. We could just, print out a list of like Google News topics and go down it if that's what they really want.
Sorry,
no.
Say that again.
It was a funny joke. I'm gonna leave it there in the metaverse for you to find later. I'll leave it. our audience still decide if it's funny or if it was a stupid joke.
My headset is still dying. Anyway, thanks so much, everyone. We'll talk to you next
I
week.
miss
Thanks
being able to
again
laugh
for the
for real
comments.
with you guys. I'll try to get back in a Quest Pro. I will say, however, the Wi-Fi is stuck through on the Quest 3, so there's that. I will see you all later. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you for the new subscription. See you later.